So the court issued a suppression of some flyers in the defendant's vehicle in the order from August 1st of 2019. I've discussed it with Mr. Moran. My understanding is he's not going to put in the flyer that was found in the folder, which is specified by the court. The court didn't specify about the similar index cards that were the same thing inside a packaged area as well. We had interpreted the analysis to mean that both were suppressed. If both were suppressed, we would ask that the defense not introduce them. I would acknowledge that the order is not explicit as to the index cards, but talks about flyers of Dylan and refers to
They're
a
all
folder.
recovered from the same spot, right?
Generally, but not exactly. And I can approach with the two photos. One's in a folder and one's in like a boxed envelope. May I approach?
Yes. And you guys are going to have to help me with what happened here, okay?
In the order the court
in the folder, I remember specifically anything in the folder I said couldn't come in.
exactly right. And so
I didn't know, either I didn't know or I didn't remember. I don't remember about the cards.
right. So we relied upon that, not putting it in our case in chief. If we misunderstood the court's order, then I understand why defense counsel would be able to put them in. The court's orders from August 1st of 2019. I had thought the court meant none of these flyers or various things are coming in
Well, where was this little box taken from?
inside the truck, and I'm not exactly sure from looking at the photographs.
So you don't know it was out of a briefcase or?
No, I don't think it was out of a briefcase, but I don't want to speak with certainty. So either way, Judge, I think there's a 403 analysis as well. There have been objections to these flyers coming in at different points in the case. The biggest example was at the vigil and flyers being passed out. We don't think they have much value under 401. Based on the court's ruling, we would ask the court that these not be admissible, but I acknowledge that the court did specifically say in the folder. Part of it is that we don't want it to be suggested that we didn't put this into evidence. And if that suggestion's not made, it would alleviate the concerns. We were relying upon the court's ruling.
Mr. Moran, what are you thinking about putting in 1093 or what are you thinking?
I'm going to really struggle to not use the language of specious. One, with the suppression, that would mean that we're the gatekeeper of that information. If we wanted to introduce it, that would be something the defense would have druthers to do. Second, the prosecution has elicited repeatedly from witnesses not the box, but
You moved to suppress the search of the truck. This is from Whatcom, Washington, correct? Am I remembering right?
This is from the Dodge, Judge. This
Oh,
was
it's from the Dodge, I'm sorry.
yes.
so yes, and I mean we moved to suppress most of that stuff, and I should probably have this framed on my wall because we won one, and I think it was Your Honor's order about the items in the folder being outside the scope of that particular search warrant. So yes, and I'm not going to seek to admit those, though I think that we probably could. We'll save that discussion for another day. 1093, the box-like envelope is in fact a box, and the items in it were in plain view. We intend to introduce those. The envelope or the folder, the file folder, was the subject of Your Honor's order. So without reaching the issue of whether the defense could introduce something that was seized from Mr. Redwine outside of a search warrant, whether Mr. Redwine could choose to waive that particular impediment.
I'm not saying you can't choose to waive it. We don't need to argue about that. I'm just thinking that opens up probably the rest of the search, and I don't know what effect that would have.
We're not going to introduce the
So
contents.
fine, so we don't need to talk about it.
But the box of cards that have Dylan's face on them and say missing teen, that's.
And when are we planning on this coming in? What was the thought?
Kevin Torres from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation did or helped with the search of the vehicle. He was present when things were taken from it. He was there when luminol and phenolphthalein testing was done on the
That
places.
wasn't my question. When are you going to try and introduce
Beg
it?
your
This
pardon?
afternoon?
Today.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Sorry.
So after this next witness?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Or
I'll do-
2 witnesses from now.
So I need to do a little research. That was my question, so I could know what was going on. I'm not, if I didn't suppress it, I would think they'd come in. If it's part of the same search, I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at my order. I'll have to go back and look at the motions. I'll have to go back, and I don't know if I can at this point. Do we have the returns on the
Yes.
motions?
The returns are attached to defense counsel's motion.
Okay,
And
and this was, the cards were talked about in the returns? Did I just miss it?
No, they're not in there. That's part of why I'm asking for guidance. I think I've been transparent with Mr. Moran about this, and I'm being transparent with the court. I think that we just don't know about the cards. So the court actually suppressed multiple items in there that were in envelope type things, and these cards were as well. They're just not explicitly addressed. So I understand either ruling, Judge. I'm just asking for the clarification. I think with the limited relevance, it's worth raising now. And I'm particularly concerned that the defense not make the argument that we're for some reason not showing these to the jury. So
Are you okay with that, Mr. Moran?
The argument about the lack of evidence, and that's part of the reasonable
No,
doubt.
no, the argument that they're hiding something because this was found by law enforcement and they didn't put it on their case in chief. I mean, I think that's fair to prohibit that, and then you can put in 1093 all you want.
Yeah,
Okay,
hadn't dawned on me until.
okay, all right. So
may I
let me-
approach this?
yeah, let me hang on to 1105.
Sure.
Actually, these are yours, correct?
Yes, but you can
But
have
can
them.
I'll keep 1105 so it's part of the record, but this one will come in. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, Aaron. With that, are we ready to go?
People are, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's call the jury up. Excuse me. Yeah. Or even more here.
I can't get him to the big screen.
It's okay. It's just the best we got.
Okay.
Oh, he was there for a second. Okay, let's just leave it that way then. If it keeps going to the other one,
I think it's just because the.
jury needs to see him.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, mine just shows a. Well, as long as it's good here, that's what we want. Well, there's probably other people doing video testimony today. Okay, thank you. And then whenever you want, Aaron, this will be a court exhibit, I guess, or whatever we want to call it. They talked about it. I just thought it should be yours. Okay. Not admitted. All right. Well, the other one they're gonna introduce. Yeah, so that'll be fine. That was 1105. As long as he shows up there, that's all that matters. Okay, we can be seated. Mr. Bogan, is this your witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Announce his name, please.
Yes, Mr. Eric Smith.
So, Mr. Smith, I don't think you can see me. I'm Judge Wilson. Could you raise your right hand for us, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, are you muted somehow?
He's trying to talk, right?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bogan.
It pleases the court. Mr. Smith, can you hear me? My name's Justin Bogan, attorney for Mr. Mark Redwine. Over.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Can you please state and spell your name for the court reporter in the record, please?
My name is Eric, E-R-I-C-H, Smith, S-M-I-T-H.
And how are you currently employed, sir?
I'm a firearms and tool mark examiner at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
How long have you been doing that for?
I've been at the FBI laboratory since 1998, and I was qualified as a firearms and tool marks examiner in 2002.
Can you explain to the jury what it means to be qualified by the FBI as a firearms and tool marks expert?
You have to go through a series of specialized training. It starts off with a manual that outlines all the elements necessary to be competent both in firearms, tool mark identification, and gunshot residue. You actually are assigned to a mentor who's going to guide you through the training. And during the training, you're going to look at what we call known matches, things that were produced by the same tool, and known non-matches, things that were produced by different tools. So you're going to look at hundreds, if not thousands, of comparisons during the training. And at the end of the training, you actually go through a series of tests. 3 are oral boards where other qualified examiners get to test your knowledge. And then 3 moot courts where you are in a courtroom setting similar to this, where you handle evidence and you testify to your results. If you're successful in all those elements, you're qualified by the FBI laboratory.
Does that mean in that capacity as a firearms and tool marks expert that you conduct tool mark analysis on various and sundry items?
That is correct. Actually, you should think of a firearm as just a specialized tool for shooting bullets and expelling cartridge cases. So firearms is just a subset of tool mark identification.
How many examinations, or how many tool mark examinations do you believe you've done since you've been employed in this capacity at the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
I've done thousands of comparisons. They're too numerous to count.
And I think we'll get into the specifics of this in case you explain one more time briefly what a comparison is. Over.
If you're at my laboratory, there's a series of steps. There's a methodology that we go through. But we've kind of jumped to the end with a comparison. There's a large instrument. It's a comparison microscope. It has 2 stages on it. It allows you to put one specimen on one side and another one on the other side. And an optical bridge allows me to look at the 2 specimens simultaneously. And when I'm looking through the comparison microscope, I am looking for patterns of similarity between the 2 specimens.
And when you talk about analysis, that's what you mean when you say you've done tool mark investigation, is that process. Is that correct?
That is one of the components of the process.
Are you a member of any particular associations regarding tool mark examinations? And could you recite those, please?
Yeah, I'm a member of AFTE, which stands for the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. I'm also a member of ENSPI, which is the European Network of Forensic Scientists.
How about the Organization of Scientific Area Committees? Have you had any work or membership with that organization?
Yes, I have. That is an organization that is working to build standards within the forensic community.
Mr. Doherty?
Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt. The people would stipulate to Mr. Smith being qualified as an expert in firearm and tool mark analysis and comparison.
Mr. Bogan, is that sufficient?
At this time, we would stipulate and offer Mr. Eric Smith as an expert in tool mark analysis.
Okay, he'll be accepted as an expert in that field.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now that you've been qualified, Mr. Smith, I'd like you to explain in a little bit more detail exactly what, in layperson terms, tool mark analysis is. You told us about the scopes that you use, but what's the purpose? What are the elements of that kind of investigation?
For our discipline, you have to think of the tool in simple terms. The tool is the harder of two objects. So the harder object comes into contact with the softer object, and it leaves an imperfection behind, which we call a tool mark, which will have sometimes class characteristics of the tool that make contact with it, as well as individual characteristics will help you identify a particular tool.
And does that mean that you're trained in how to identify what kind of tool or what set of tools can leave certain marks on objects?
That is correct.
That training and experience, does that include being able to identify whether bladed instruments or knives can lead specific kinds of marks on objects?
That is correct.
In this case, you were asked to do a tool mark analysis of the partial cranium of Dylan Redwine. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir, I do.
And if necessary, for the purposes of refreshing your recollection, do you have your report on that handy?
I do.
Can you explain for the jury what you did when you received the partial cranium? Was it packaged? What kind of condition was it in? Is basically what I'm asking.
It would have come, and it is recorded as being within a sealed case, and it was delivered.
And what's your initial step? I take it you unpack it, and what's your initial step in unpacking this element?
Right. So now we're actually talking about the methodology for the discipline.
Yes.
So the first component is the evaluation. What is the object that I'm in this case? Oftentimes people will send things in, they want a forensic exam, and you just pull it out of the box, and it's not suitable for this particular discipline. So what is it that I have? In this case, it was a piece of bone which happened to be partial skull material.
And you said partially, and then I couldn't hear the last part of your answer. Forgive me.
Skull.
And did you have the opportunity to inspect some marks on the right zygomatic arch of that partial cranium?
I did.
And did you partake in a comparative analysis, and forgive me if I'm not using the right terms, regarding tool marks and those marks on the right zygoma?
I think one of the things you need to understand is in the methodology. So the first step we evaluated this object, but now we're looking at the tool marks, and the first element that we consider are the class characteristics. And class characteristics are anything that are predetermined prior to manufacturing. So for a tool, it might be, we're going to make a knife of a certain length and certain dimension, or we're going to make a hammer. It's going to be a ball peen hammer. So the manufacturer has a design. So these are elements that are predetermined and they're measurable features. So they're class characteristics. And one of the other elements that we will try to ascertain is what is the type of action that may have been used by the tool. So was it a sawing type action? Was it a pinching? Either pliers that might be gripping? These are actual actions that the tool produces. And those are things that we can sometimes glean in the class characteristics. So those are all elements that we categorize up front. And actually at this stage, if I had a tool, and in this case, I did not have a tool, I would be able to possibly eliminate it if the class characteristics were different. But if they're not different, and I had a tool, then there would be the situation where I'd have to do a comparison of the tool to tool marks, suspect tool marks.
And in the first phase of your analysis here, when you're identifying class characteristics of the marks, one of the things you identified was trying to determine what kind of action left those marks. Did I hear you correctly?
That is correct.
And do you also try and determine the size and orientation of these two marks on the right zygoma?
I took some general measurements of the marks and their position.
Do you recall what the size of the marks were?
Can I refer to my notes?
I think that I know that's recorded in your notes by all means.
So for the two marks, I designated them both A and B to delineate between the two marks. And I measured the length of mark A to be 0.09 of an inch long, and the length of mark B 0.07 of an inch long.
Was that inch or centimeter, sir?
That's in inches.
You also identified what you believed was the kind of action that left these marks. Can you describe that, if you recall, to the jury?
Right. So in examining these marks, these tool marks, I determined them to be produced by a slicing or cutting type action.
After you did the initial assessment of size and orientation and action, what did you do next, observing these two marks on the right zygoma?
At that point, all the data that I can achieve from the examination, I compiled it into my notes, and then I produced a report to my findings.
Did you use any sort of microscope in your analysis of these two marks?
I took a photograph using my comparison microscope just to get a enlarged image of the area that contained the two marks.
And what, if anything, did you learn from that picture you took with a microscope?
Well, that was for documentation purposes only for my notes. I didn't use that to make any determination of the tool marks themselves. That was based on a physical examination, as well as looking at them under a stereo microscope.
Under a what?
Stereo microscope.
Okay. What sort of information did you learn about these marks with the, I think you said stereo microscope,
That's correct.
if I heard. What sort of information did you learn about the marks?
The same information that I just relayed, that they are tool marks, very small tool marks, but they're consistent with having been produced by a slicing or cutting action.
And consistent with your training, when you look at tool marks, you can identify striations and different kind of marks within tool marks, correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain why you can do that?
Well, if we use a tool, in this particular situation, let's pretend that the tool is a knife. If the cutting edge is ground, the grinding of that metal creates individual characteristics, which are encapsulated around the class characteristics of the knife blade. When that tool mark is made and the knife is embedded into a softer object, those individual characteristics are imparted into the tool mark, and you can use those for comparison purposes.
So in layperson terms, does that mean using a microscope, you can look and see if there's a certain kind of striation there or residue or whatnot, and see if that actually matches a particular kind of tool? Am I getting that right?
Right, but in this situation, the two tool marks that are contained within the skull have no microscopic marks of value for comparison. So even if I had a tool to compare to that, there's no individual characteristics that are present for doing that comparison.
And in case it's not obvious to the jury, I am going to ask you to iterate or reiterate, because that sounds like a term of art. No microscopic marks of value. What does that mean exactly?
That means when I'm looking at the actual tool mark, I've already moved past the class characteristics. Now I'm trying to look for what might be impressed features, a defect that might have been present in the tool that's now imparted into the tool mark. As we mentioned before, striated tool marks, marks that look like scratches, for a better use of the term. These are the individual characteristics that we're looking at. So in evaluating any tool mark up front, you're looking at both the class and does it contain any individual characteristics suitable for comparison purposes.
And when you're conducting a tool mark analysis, you can come to 3 different opinions or conclusions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those are exclusion, identification, and inconclusive, correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain to the jury what exclusion means?
Exclusion would be if there's a difference in class characteristics. If I have an impression that is a circle, but my tool is rectangular, then I know that this tool did not create that twin. So the class characteristics are different. Inconclusive means that the 2 tool marks are both same in class. They both have circular features, but now the individual characteristics, the striations that I'm comparing, there's insufficient agreement in the individual characteristics that would be consistent what I would have seen with tools that made the same tool mark, or better than the best known non-match that I've ever seen in comparing to.
And when you're describing this process and what inconclusive means, you're speaking hypothetically, right?
No, I'm not speaking hypothetically. This is basically how the science works. This isn't hypothetical.
Can you explain what identification means to the jury, please?
So identification means all the class characteristics are the same. And now I have agreement in the pattern of individual characteristics, whether it be striations or an impression, that is sufficient to indicate that this is an identification.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
Could you repeat that last answer? Because I couldn't understand it either.
Sure. So when you're comparing 2 items and the patterns, the agreement in the patterns is sufficient in agreement, then you can conclude that this is an identification.
I want to talk about your results of your analysis of the 2 marks on the zygoma in this case. And what were those results?
I reported out the type of action that was utilized to produce the marks, and that there was no microscopic marks of value present within the marks for comparison purposes.
Did you also determine if these marks could be produced by a tool or from environmental exposure?
Right, so in this situation, I didn't have a tool to compare, and I couldn't exclude the possibility that these may have been introduced accidentally within the environment, being that it was found outside.
Well, specifically, your report says it could not be determined if these marks were produced by a tool or from environmental exposure, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
And could you determine if these marks were even made by the same mechanism?
I could not.
So in your expert opinion, these marks could have been caused by 2 separate tools as you define them, correct?
That is correct.
And can you remind the jury one more time what your definition is of a tool when you're doing this sort of analysis, please?
Right, so the tool is the harder of two objects, and the tool mark is the mark that's left behind when the tool, the harder object, comes in contact with the softer object.
When you were working on this project, did you also have the opportunity to look at what were described as scrape marks above the brow on the cranium as well?
May I check my notes one more time?
By all means.
Yes, I did indicate that there was a scrape mark, but I don't know necessarily the anatomical position of that scrape mark.
And what, if any, conclusion regarding tool mark analysis did you have of those scrape marks?
This particular mark has no class characteristics, so it can't gleam anything, and it had no microscopic marks of value for comparison purposes.
Did this mark above the brow have even less information for you to analyze than the marks on the zygoma?
Yes, sir.
And your analysis of those scrape marks was that you couldn't determine if they were made by a tool or from environmental exposure, correct?
That is correct.
So at the conclusion of your analysis of this cranium, you couldn't determine if any of these marks flowed from a man-made tool or from environmental exposure.
That is correct.
Environmental exposure including possible animal damage.
That is correct.
Nothing further on direct, Judge.
Any cross?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Can you pull the microphone closer to you? Sure. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
So fair to say the FBI lab is accredited and uses best practices in their work?
That is correct. We are accredited.
And when I say accredited, just so the jury's aware, that means you have validated procedures, annual audits, and different steps in place to make sure that your lab is employing rigorous testing and can produce validated results. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And you and your lab at the FBI use scientifically sound measures, right?
That is correct.
And I should say thank you for your service as well. You've been with the FBI for how long?
Since 1998.
And in looking over your statement of qualifications, you've worked on many, thousands of cases over the years. Is that right?
Thousands might be a little high, but it's quite a few.
And looking at the cases you list on your statement of qualifications, many of them have been murder cases where you were asked to do a firearms comparison or tool mark comparison, right?
That is correct.
Some of them, fair to say, particularly brutal murders involving firearms.
Yes, that would be fair to say.
And in that work, and I'm going to start to talk about the comparison analysis that you were discussing with defense counsel on direct, but in the work on firearm analysis, part of what you're seeking to do is to compare spent shell casings, bullets, and firearms to one another to see if they match up, right?
If they can be identified to each other or identified to a particular firearm.
Right, so you're trying to see if the spent shell casing left behind after a shooting could be identified as coming from a particular firearm that you're provided for comparison.
That is correct.
Which is why in your line of work or our line of work, there are times where shell casings and firearms are not left behind at the scene. Is that fair to say?
That is true.
Or if someone isn't in our line of work and they watch TV in the movies, they see someone scurrying about taking the shell casings because they don't want anybody to be able to compare the different things that could identify them as having committed the crime.
If I don't have the items to compare them, I can't make any kind of determination.
So, for example, if you don't have the knife or the sharp force instrument, then you don't have a tool to make a comparison to tool marks that you find.
That is correct.
In this case, the FBI was contacted by the La Plata County Sheriff's Office, am I right?
That is correct.
And the FBI agreed to assist in this manner in a variety of ways, but also the tool mark comparison that you've testified about on direct.
That is correct.
And you generated a report which was provided to the prosecution and then on to the defense counsel, right?
That is correct.
And you met with defense counsel and you met with the prosecution in preparation for this trial.
That is true.
So you and I have spoken before.
Yes, sir, we have.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about your examination of the partial skull of Dylan Redwine, okay?
Sure.
You were asked to look to see whether you could identify injuries that were reported to be located on the root of the right zygomatic arch and examine that for tool marks, am I right?
That is correct.
And in fact, throughout the course of your career, I believe you testified on direct, you've looked at thousands of different tool marks.
That is correct.
And in this case, when you looked at Dylan's skull, you in fact saw two tool marks in the area of the right zygomatic arch, am I right?
That is correct.
And by tool marks, what I mean by that is that that's not there naturally. That's not something that's supposed to exist on that part of his skull. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And I believe you defined a tool mark as a harder object coming into contact with a softer object.
That is correct.
And the softer object here, Mr. Smith, is actually human bone, right?
That is correct.
So it's going to take a particularly hard object to cut into human bone. Is that fair to say?
Foundation. I think that's a pathological. I think that's a better question for a forensic pathologist about the qualities of bone are and what's harder than it.
Well, I don't know. He may have the ability to do that. I don't know. You can lay a foundation if you want, Mr. Doherty, on that.
Have you seen, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Smith, have you seen tool mark injuries on human bone throughout your career with the FBI?
Yes, I have.
Fair to say it takes a particularly hard object to cut into human bone in your experience looking at tool mark injuries?
Same objection. Particularly hard is also a vague question.
It is somewhat vague, but I think common experience maybe can talk about. I think it's okay. I mean, he's going to know how much force and what it's going to take in terms of hardness to scratch various items. I think that's part of his expertise. Am I right about that? Is that something that you've studied?
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
Thank you. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Smith, can you answer the question for the jury, please?
In both examination as in research, sometimes I have to actually cut bone material, and it is harder material. It is a hard material, to cut at times.
And in examining Dylan's skull, you were able to observe what you referred to on direct as a slicing, cutting type action.
That is correct.
And it's possible, in your expert opinion, that that slicing, cutting type action was actually inflicted by a tool or cutting instrument. Is that fair to say?
That is true.
Counsel pointed out that in your role as a tool mark analyst, you could not determine if those marks were produced by tools or from environmental exposure. Is that fair?
That is correct.
And as counsel pointed out, you'd want to look to a forensic pathologist for that kind of analysis. Am I right?
That's not what I said. I said a forensic pathologist could speak to the hardness of bone compared to other items.
Right, but I think it's a fair question. So you can answer the question, Mr. Smith.
Could you repeat the question?
That'd be the kind of work a forensic pathologist would do, right?
I would surmise, yes, that is the type of work that they do.
And counsel asked you about wildlife. It's fair to say you have a tremendous amount of expertise, but wildlife is actually outside your area of expertise. Am I right?
That's true. I'm not a wildlife expert.
And for that, you want to look at a forensic anthropologist in the state of Colorado. Am I right?
Or an anthropologist in general.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
An
couldn't hear the last
anthropologist
part.
in general.
And in addition to the 2 marks that you believe, in your expert opinion, might be from a tool or cutting instrument, you also identified a scrape mark. Am I right?
That is correct.
And that's separate than the 2 cuts that you were just discussing, right?
That is correct.
And can you just clarify for the jury where the scrape mark that you identified on Dylan's skull was located, please?
As before, I'm not really sure the anatomical position of the mark as far as its position on the skull.
But it's separate from, sorry.
It's separate from the other 2 marks, the 2 cutting marks.
Thank you. And tool mark identification is a empirical science that relies on objective measurements, but also your subjective comparison of the microscopic marks you may find, right?
That is correct.
And I believe you said on direct that you would have to have a tool to compare it to. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And in this case, there was no tool or weapon left behind for which you could do your expert comparison.
That is correct.
And just to be clear, when you look, or if you had a tool, Mr. Smith, would
Yes,
you
sir.
attempt to do a mold or a casting so that you could do a comparison between the 2?
There's several different ways that I could attempt to do this examination, one of which would include casting.
Because to be clear, you wouldn't take the knife and start putting it into the bone to see if it matches up, right?
No, we wouldn't do that.
And so you would either need a tool or more context to be able to render a conclusive opinion about whether this was a particular knife or not that was used to inflict the slicing, cutting type action into Dylan's skull.
Assumes facts, not in evidence, when he refers to what kind of particular knife.
No, it's to determine whether or not. I guess you're right. I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Misunderstood. You want to ask the question again? I think that's easily remediable.
Sure, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Smith, you would need a tool for comparison or perhaps more context in order to determine whether a particular knife, saw, weapon, whatever, was used to inflict the slicing, cutting type action that you observed in Dylan's skull.
That is correct.
And when you say context, what would context include?
For me, context would be the 2 marks that are there have very limited information. There is class information, although very subtle, but I don't have the individual characteristics that I would need to be able to identify it to a particular tool.
And counsel asked you about the packaging for the skull.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you aware that the cranium was hand-delivered by a member of the La Plata County Sheriff's Office in what's called a pelican case for purposes of delivery?
I don't have first-hand knowledge, but my notes indicated it was in a sealed case. It was within a Ziploc bag within a sealed case.
I have nothing further. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Redirect?
Yes, please. Now, Mr. Smith, counsel pointed out that you're not an expert in animals. Remember talking about that a few moments ago?
Yes, sir.
As you've also testified, you've been with the FBI doing tool mark analysis. for almost 2 decades, safe to say?
Yes, sir.
And you take your analysis and the reports you write very seriously, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you take every word you put in those reports seriously, correct?
Yes, sir.
Including the reports you wrote in this case.
Yes, sir.
And in this case, you said it could not be determined if these were produced by a tool or tools from environmental exposure by an animal, referring to marks A and B. Remember writing that?
Yes, sir.
And you said the same thing about the other scrape marks. Unknown if these were produced by a tool or tools from environmental exposure by an animal. Your word animal, correct?
That is correct.
Nothing further, Judge.
Any questions from the jury? No? Can this witness be excused?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You're free to go. Ladies and gentlemen, because I'm having computer problems, I want to help the bandwidth through the entire courthouse because this is eating it up with having 2 of these things going. And to get that out of the way, we're going to take a recess. So it won't be very long, but you can go downstairs for a couple minutes and get a drink or whatever you need to do. And Mr. Smith, you're free to go. I thought I said that. didn't I? Yeah, we need to work on it. You want to go grab Becca so she does what she needs to do? Okay, we'll be in recess until we're ready to go. And then I got to shut everything down and then I got to I lost everything.
Your Honor, how many minutes? Pardon me.
You got 5 or 10. It's going to take us a little while to get all this accomplished. This time I won't start without you. That's a long time. Yeah, that'll be a minute. Turn that off. Move it a little more that way, Kelly. There, right there. Okay. Oh. Reach. Get that going too, huh? Gosh, you can send me something. You want me out too? All right. Just now, yeah, should I do it again? I'm out. Can we try it again? Yeah. All right. Do something. Yeah, I didn't say I was connected either. All right, so I'll get out of it. I'll be back in a second. I know it's gonna take a minute. Once you have the three come up there. Although, we need, okay.
that you? It is. Doesn't smell like stress, sweat, and cadavers.
Everybody rise for the jury? Okay, be seated. Next defense witness?
Your Honor, the defense will call Karen Alexander, please.
Okay. Come on up, the witness, stand up here, please. And if you'd raise your right hand before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Thank you. Have a seat. Make sure you speak into the microphone.
Good afternoon, Ms. Alexander.
Hi,
Will you please state and spell your last name for the record?
Karen Alexander, KarenAlexander,
Where are you from?
Bakersfield, California.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a retired checker and recently went to work for Amazon.
I understand you've also recently had a grandchild.
Yes, I did, my first.
Awesome. But
Yes,
his name? How do you know Mr. Redwine?
I know Mr. Redwine. I met him probably 10 years ago in Bakersfield. He was working at a job site and I met him in a bar.
Are you a big drinker?
No,
Okay. After meeting Mr. Redwine, did you spend time together in Bakersfield?
yes, he was staying at a La Quinta hotel in Bakersfield. And we went out a couple of times and he came to my house and some of the workers that were with him came to my house. We barbecued and He just hung out a lot. We did a lot of things.
And after that job was completed in Bakersfield, or was it during the time the job was completed in Bakersfield, you got a chance to come visit?
No, he was still working in Bakersfield at the time when I went to Durango.
Okay. And so you did have a chance to come visit him at his house in Durango or Vallecito?
Yes,
And was it the one up by the lake?
yes.
Do you remember approximately the year?
It's been probably 10 years, so 11 maybe, or 12.
And would you disagree with me if I said that Bakersfield job was 2012?
No, because I don't remember the exact year.
Was it the summer before Dylan went missing that you visited Vallecito?
Yes,
And when you visited Vallecito, how long did you stay?
we were there probably 4 or 5 days. It was a long weekend, so it was on a holiday. I can't remember Memorial or Labor Day.
Was there anyone there with you aside from just Mr. Redwine?
Yes, Dylan came to visit.
I wanted to talk about that in a moment, but first, when was the last time you've spoken with Mr. Redwine, if you remember?
Oh, it's been years, probably. I don't know how many years. It's been quite a while. Life change. You just lose track of time.
Do you continue to have, or have you maintained any interest in a romantic relationship with him?
No.
And did you reach out to anyone to let them know you wanted to be involved in this case, or were you clicking your heels to come to court?
No, actually, when I heard that he was arrested, I talked with my son about it because I thought I could be a character witness. And my son said, just, think about it. So I prayed about it, and I told God that if it's meant to be, somebody needs to reach out to me. I'm not going to make the effort. And he reached out to me.
This will be apparent why I ask what may seem like a silly question now, but it'll be apparent later. But do you know what Photoshop is?
No. I've heard of it, and I know my son and my daughter do it, but I've never done it.
So vaguely aware that it's something you do with computers?
Something you do with photos, that's all I know. And computers or pictures or whatever. I've never done it.
So are you able to say if you're photoshopping something, what in fact you're doing?
Okay, so Photoshop to me is putting pictures on something or like multiple pictures on something. That's what I consider photoshopping. I don't know how to Photoshop. I'm not that savvy. So to me, taking a picture off something and moving it onto like Facebook or Instagram and then maybe putting multiple ones, that's what I consider photoshopping to me.
So photoshopping would be taking a picture from one place and putting it into your Instagram account, your Facebook.
Yeah, that's how I look at it, but that's how I do it.
Or, and then the other, do you think it's combining pictures?
Well, that's what I meant, like multiple. Like in a frame, you have one picture and you add another or two. To me, that's photoshopping in the same frame.
Like a collage?
Yeah.
Not making many photos into one photo.
No.
Ms. Alexander, switching gears a little bit here, have you been following this case?
No. I haven't. I had not read up on it or seen anything on it. I heard actually on the news years ago when they found Dylan, it was like on the national news. And then when he was arrested, I saw it on the news, but I haven't been keeping up on it. There's nothing in Bakersfield. There's nothing on the news or in the papers.
So you mentioned that you did, in fact, meet Dylan, and if I understood you correctly, it was summer of 2012.
Yeah,
a holiday
well,
weekend.
whatever year, but yes, I did meet Dylan.
And would it make sense to you that it was Memorial Day, early summer?
Yeah, that or Labor Day, whichever one. I don't remember.
Will you describe for the jury the child you encountered? What did you make of Dylan? Was he polite? Was he
When I first met Dylan, he was very quiet, but then he warmed up to me after a few days. But he was just a typical child. He liked to do stuff. I had just bought 2 handguns, 45s, and Mark said, let's take them back so you can shoot them. There's not a lot of places in Bakersfield to shoot. So we took the guns back, and Dylan asked if he could shoot the guns. So we went out, way out somewhere. I don't know where it was, but Mark, which I laugh about, Mark made him put on his full face motorcycle helmet with the shield and would not let him shoot unless he had the shield on, because he said if the 45 kicked back and hit him in the head, Elaine there'd be a lot of paperwork involved. So he didn't want any trouble with Elaine. But yeah, we just did stuff. We barbecued, and we went out on the quad, and we hiked up the mountain, and we went shopping at the mall. We just did normal stuff. He's just like a normal kid, like my son.
Happy-go-lucky, would you?
Yeah.
How about, did you observe anything in him that caused you to think he was independent?
Well, he was independent where he would like go off on the quad or go walk off, or go for a walk or do stuff like that, independent like that. He was self-sufficient, if that makes sense.
While you were there, did he ever leave to go to a friend's house?
I believe he left to go to a friend's house, and I don't remember if he walked or if he took off on the quad.
But he did not need to get a ride.
We never took him anywhere. No, and he never rode with anybody.
Were there any occasions where he left Dad's house without departing on the four-wheeler?
Honestly, I can't remember. Like I said, he walked off. There was a time he went for a walk, and then there was a time he took off on the quad. So I can't remember which was which.
Did you get an opportunity to see how Mark and Dylan got along together?
Yes, we played. Matter of fact, I don't know what we did that day. It might have been after we were shooting, but we went back to the house, the barbecue, and we played football in the front yard, 3 of us, and had a lot of fun.
What kind of dad was Mark to Dylan as you saw them together?
Very attentive.
Did you ever have an opportunity to see Dylan driving his dad's truck?
We went to dinner one night. There was like kind of like a log cabin looking restaurant and grocery store down the road from Mark's place. And so we were going to dinner down there, and Dylan asked him if he could drive. And so Mark said, yeah, you can drive down the road and then drive us back home. So he was all excited. So we drove down the road to the restaurant. He wanted us to eat really fast so he could drive back up the hill to the house. But yeah, he was just like a normal child.
Did you ever, in those days that you were there, see Dylan go fishing?
I saw his pole, and I saw him leave, but I never really actually saw him take off and go fishing. I know he walked down to when you leave Mark's house and you go out to the right, if you go down the road and make a left, there's like I call it a creek or river. I don't know what it is, but there's something there that you can go and fish.
Down by the bridge?
Yeah, it's by a bridge.
Did you have any reason to think that that's where Dylan had gone fishing?
Well, that's the only place I really ever saw around there to fish, so that's where I would assume he would have went.
Did he walk?
Yeah.
How long was he gone for?
Whenever he left, he'd be on for like an hour.
Did he bring his fishing pole?
Like I said, I saw the fishing pole in the house by the door, but I didn't pay that much attention to what he went and did.
But you don't know if he took a fishing pole or not?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not
Yeah.
clear to me.
I don't know if he took it with him when he left, but I assumed that's where he went when he went down to fish.
And you said that you saw Mark and Dylan throwing the football. Did you observe any playful roughhousing?
Yeah, we were playing like tackle, running back and forth. His yard was this way, not this way. So we were running back and forth because he had a covert type thing he drove over a little covert thing into driveway, so you couldn't play that way. But yeah, they were. We were laughing. We had music playing, and we were just barbecuing. He barbecued on his porch, so we were right out front.
What else did, or was there any baseball that you saw?
We didn't play baseball. We just played with the football.
Do you remember what time Dylan got up in the morning?
Oh yeah, Dylan slept on the couch in the front room, and I have a son, and Mark was very attentive to his son. And excuse me, we were going to go shopping into town, and it was like, I want to say Saturday morning, and Dylan was asleep. He always was on the couch downstairs, and he watched Nickelodeon, and he watched Cartoon Network, and he played his, I want to say it was a PlayStation, could have been an Xbox, I'm not sure. But he would play, and he'd be up late at night, so he'd be sleeping, and we'd get up to go, and Mark would just be walking around with a cigarette and a cup of coffee, hollering, "Dylan, Billy boy, let's go, come on, let's go. Let's go, get up, Billy boy." And it took him probably 2 hours to get up. He didn't make it to the mall until noon.
Did I hear that right? He was sleeping on the couch?
Yeah.
Would you recognize an image of Mr. Redwine's home if I were to put it on the screen behind you?
Oh, yeah.
Published and give it 1087. Go ahead.
Okay.
Does this look familiar?
Yeah.
Can you indicate for the jury where Dylan was sleeping? Okay, I'll have you have a seat for a moment too. I've got a few more questions, and then I'll have you stand again if you don't mind. Are you familiar with an organization called CBI?
No.
You don't, have you ever heard of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
No.
Has anybody from law enforcement ever approached you with photographs to talk to you about them?
No.
Was there an occasion when you were at Mr. Redwine's house and you observed Dylan to have a bloodletting, an event where he was bleeding?
The night that we barbecued at Mark's house, he had brought in the meat, and Dylan was cutting the meat and cut the end of his finger. So Mark came in, got him a Band-Aid, and we went and sat down on the love seat. And he was dropping blood as he went to it. Not a lot, but he had a paper towel on it like this. And then Mark went in the bathroom, which is just right off the bedroom, got a Band-Aid, and came over and put the Band-Aid on his finger, and then we went back to eating.
Will you use that pointer and show the jury which part of the couch or love seat that Dylan was at? So Mark bandaged Dylan.
Yeah.
And when you were at Mr. Redwine's house, was he just getting in town from working in the field?
Yes, we had just left Bakersfield and drove from Bakersfield back to Durango. And when we got into Durango, he had to go in the next morning and take in payroll and all of his work and timesheets. So he went into Durango, took in all that stuff, and I stayed at the house.
Did he seem tired as he was getting into Durango.
Yeah, he was tired. Yeah, it was a long drive. We drove straight through.
And so errands in the morning, he had to run to town. Is that right? I think you mentioned this, but did you pay any attention to what television programming Dylan was tuning into?
Yes, we watched. I sat and watched with him on that love seat on the TV, Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. We watched SpongeBob and a bunch of cartoons, and then he would turn it off, and I played a little bit with him on, I can't remember, Xbox or the PlayStation, one or the other, and we played games. And that's when,
There's no question right now. Wait for a question.
okay.
Ms. Alexander, do you remember the FBI coming to your home?
Yes,
And did it happen on two different occasions?
yes.
Do you remember what you were doing on the second occasion when the agents came to your house?
Babysitting. I had took care of little 2-year-olds. I had 4 of them.
And do you remember speaking with the FBI and saying that you thought, well, let me ask you this. Was that in approximately April of 2013?
I don't know. I don't remember when it was. I know it was back in that time frame.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at a report?
I never saw the report, so yeah.
May I approach?
You may.
Four, 16, or 13.
That sound right?
I guess. That's
Okay,
my best.
sometimes people can read reports and sometimes they can't. Is that how that works in this courtroom?
I never saw the report, any of the reports from the FBI.
Does it refresh your recollection as to the approximate time when they visited you?
Yeah,
Do you remember telling the FBI that you thought, oh, he doesn't get to just simply ask her what she remembers?
No, I agree that you need to ask a question first and see if she remembers, and then you may be able to get it in, you may not, but you need to ask the question.
Do you remember what you told the FBI about Elaine?
No.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at what they wrote?
yeah, but I don't remember what I said, 'cause like I said, I never saw
Well,
it.
the way this is supposed to work.
Okay, that's fine. I don't.
You don't have to have written it, okay?
Okay,
You can look at it, see if it helps you remember what the conversation was.
okay,
If it independently refreshes your memory, then you can testify about it. If not, then there's something else Ms. Moran can do about it,
okay.
okay? Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Ms. Moran.
Maybe double back to that. Do you remember a phone conversation you had with Mr. Redwine from a bowling alley?
Yes,
Do you remember what you talked to him about?
yes,
Did you make any suggestions to him?
yes, I did.
What was that suggestion?
He had,
That's an out-of-court statement that she made at that time.
What's the purpose of this, Mr. Moran?
She's subject to cross-examination, and she can remember what she said. And it's available for her to-
Well, then it's hearsay. It's an out-of-court statement. I assume it's offered for the truth of the matter asserted. That's why I asked you what it was offered for.
That she said this thing, whether it's true or not, isn't really something we're trying to get at. It's just that she made these remarks.
Come on up here. Go ahead.
I beg your pardon, this is going to take a moment. In fact, I have 30 seconds. When you had those, I'm sorry, how old did you say those children were that you were looking after?
2,
And there were how many of them?
4.
Well, I don't know. It may be relevant, but he hasn't gone far enough for me to make a decision. So go ahead.
And they were present when the FBI agents came?
Yes,
Fair to say that those kids might have, were you the only adult looking after them?
yes,
Were you distracted?
yes.
After Dylan went missing, and more specifically, after it was known that Dylan was deceased, did you keep in touch with Mr. Redwine?
Not a lot, yes. We talked,
But did that contact eventually fall off?
yes, it did.
Was it apparent to you that Mr. Redwine was upset?
Very upset.
Was it obvious to you that Mr. Redwine loved his child?
Yes, he loved Dylan very much. Talked about him all the time.
So you heard about Dylan in Bakersfield?
Yes, when we were in Bakersfield, he'd come to my house and we would barbecue, and he would sit on the patio. I lived next door to my parents. And my mom would come out and sit with us, and he would talk about Dylan because I had a son.
After it was known that Dylan was deceased, what was Mr. Redwine's emotional state?
He was upset, but Mark's not one to show a lot of emotion. He just isn't that type. I would bawl like a baby. He was upset. You could tell.
I think the prosecutor's going to have some questions for you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you. You say, I'm sorry, it's Karen Alexander?
Mhm.
But you told the FBI that your name was Karen Lee Kennedy also, right?
I'm divorced.
You gave them 2 separate names though, right?
Yes. I gave them my names, Karen Obar and Karen Kennedy. They asked me what my married names were.
Right, because in the first FBI report, you told them Karen Obar Alexander,
Uh-huh.
right? And
I
then when
don't
they-
remember.
Then they came back and you told them Karen Lee Kennedy.
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Would it help to look at the report?
I never saw the report, so yes.
Would you have given them those names?
Well, actually, my full name is Karen.
That's not the question. Did you give them 2 separate
I
names?
don't remember.
You don't remember?
Mm-mm.
Okay. When you went on the Dr. Phil show on behalf of Mark Redwine,
Yes.
you told them Karen Obar,
That's my maiden name.
right? And then when Elena Hall asked you if your real name was Karen Alexander, you denied it, didn't you?
No.
Objection, Your Honor.
Hold on. What's your objection?
I guess hearsay, that a cross-examination by Elaine Hall of Ms. Alexander. I'm not sure what the,
That would not be hearsay. Mr. Champagne, give her some time to answer the question before you
Oh.
ask your next one. All
I'm
right?
sorry, I'm talking too fast. I apologize.
Go
If I may approach, Your Honor. These are the reports from the FBI.
Okay, okay. Yes, your name.
Yeah. Start with the first one here.
Okay.
You see the date up there, December 5th, 2012.
Yes.
And your name, what is it?
Karen Obar Alexander.
And this is the one from April 16, 2013. And what's the name you gave there?
Mr. Champagne, that's the same thing I was upset with Mr. Ryan for, and you guys have been yelled at all the time. You're not supposed to just read the report out to the jury. Right?
Does that help you remember the name you gave?
Honestly, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But the report says Karen.
No, well, no, she doesn't.
Now it's a prior and consistent statement, right? That could come through this agent.
So I guess and you've already asked if that's the name you gave. You'd have to put it in that way. I think Mr. Moran's correct on that.
All right. So, when you were on the Dr. Phil show, you gave the name Karen Oba, right?
Yes. I don't remember.
And then when you were talking with Elaine Hall, she asked you if it was Karen Alexander.
I don't ever remember her asking me that.
Would it be helpful to look at the transcript from the Dr. Phil show?
If it's there, it's there. I just don't remember saying it.
I showed you that transcript. Would it help refresh your recollection?
You can show me, but like I said, I don't remember saying that. I really didn't talk to her that much.
Your Honor, object is to relevance. It's not uncommon to have a married name and
Mr. Champagne, what's the
maiden
relevance?
name.
And I
Trying to find out who this person is.
Hold on a second. It's way different in a courtroom than normal, Miss Alexander, so hang on just a
I
second.
know.
Okay. So what was your response?
Judge, I'm just trying to establish identity. I think it certainly goes to credibility.
Well, if one's a married name and one's not, I don't understand where you're going with it
We
either.
have 3 different names, Judge.
I can probably clear that up.
No, don't say anything until there's a question for you. You can approach and show her, see if it refreshes her memory. That's what you're requesting, correct? So go ahead.
Okay, counsel, this is page 4452 of discovery. There, I'm just gonna read down.
About my name? Feeling of what she shouldn't. I don't remember the conversation, but I can clear up the name.
So you were dating Mark Redwine out in Bakersfield, is that right?
Yes,
And you were dating him for several months, right?
yes.
He actually moved in with you. Is that correct?
Objection,
No.
Your Honor, as to relevance. If there's going to be any further testimony on this.
Why wouldn't that be relevant, showing the nature of the relationship?
Well, I'd like to discuss it at the bench if this is going to go any further than that.
All right, come on up. You are going
Judge, I
to further?
don't think this is necessary. I'm just trying to establish the relationship between.
Is it going to go any further was my
No.
question. Okay. Then go ahead and ask your next question.
And you said you spent a lot of time together out there, right?
Yes,
Did a lot of things.
yes,
And one of those things was that you drove from Bakersfield to Durango.
yes,
And you said that you drove in, it was a long drive, right?
yes.
You weren't coming from New Mexico, you were coming from Bakersfield.
Bakersfield.
And you talked about how you brought some guns with you.
Yes.
And you went shooting with Dylan and Mark.
Yes.
Had a good time. That was at his house, right? Up there in Vicito?
In Vicito, yes.
Yeah. And did Mark ever tell you about how the police came out to his house to visit after that?
He called me and told me that now when I went out there with the gun, we went and shot in the mountains. Me, him, and Dylan.
Mhm.
When I was at the house, they went and shot outside.
But
I went with them.
it's all the same trip though, right?
Same trip, but
And-
separate places.
But it was just the one trip. That's the only time
Yes.
you ever came to visit.
Yes.
That was in 2011, wasn't it?
Like I said, it could be 11 or 12. It was 10 years ago, 9 years ago.
But the police came out, right?
I wasn't there.
Mark called and told you about it. Would it help to look at that police report? Would that refresh your recollection about the year that occurred?
I guess I never saw anything. He told me that the police came and said that when somebody had shot the neighbor's windows with a .45. So he called me in California and told me that when him and Dylan were shooting outside, I wasn't out there, that they had accidentally shot the windows on the neighbor's house on the side when they were shooting.
And that was
So-
like later, right? That was later, like in November when he called you?
I don't remember.
Okay, counsel, page 6239 of discovery. A minute, Coach, you may. Just take a moment and read this to yourself. Let me know when you're finished.
So I was there on Labor Day.
Okay,
Okay.
refreshes your recollection. It was Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Just let me know when you're finished instead of volunteering anything. Let me ask the question for us. Does that refresh your recollection about the police coming out to Mark's house, what he described?
That, yes, what he told me.
Okay, and what's the year? Can we see the year? Does that refresh your recollection?
In 11?
2011, right?
Yeah.
So you were actually there in 2011, not
I said it was 11 or 12. I wasn't sure.
right. But this helps you be more sure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it was 2011.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're very clear on that now.
Yes, and Labor Day. Very
That's
clear.
actually exactly what you told the FBI, right? You told them 2011.
I guess I told them to. I don't remember. I never saw the report, and I really don't remember that long ago.
And it's a lot of information.
So
flying out.
11. It was 11.
It was 11. No question in your mind. Right?
Yes.
Okay. One more, please. So in 2011, you came, you visited, Dylan was there, and you saw him sleep on the couch, right?
Yes.
And you said that he was kind of hard to wake up, right?
Yes.
And then he would just lay around and just kind of like watch TV and play video games during the day.
Yes. We weren't doing something.
If he wasn't doing anything, right? If there wasn't an activity or something like that.
Yes.
And that was normal for him. You were there for 4 or 5 days, right?
Yes.
So you saw that happen more than once.
Yes.
All right. He was just a typical kid,
Just like my son, typical kid.
right? And sometimes he'd go and play with friends, but he'd be back like in an hour or so, right?
Yes.
And you never actually saw him go fishing, right?
No.
Okay. You just saw him leave and come back, and you know that he had a fishing pole at the house.
And he talked about it.
He talked about it.
Yes.
But you never saw it happen.
I never. Actually, I didn't pay attention.
Okay. But to the best of your memory, you
Yeah.
never saw him fish.
No.
You said that when you drove in from California, no, scratch that. I'm not even going to bring it up. Never mind. Strike that. Now, out in Bakersfield, you were like in a committed relationship with Mark, right?
We were dating.
You were dating.
Yeah.
And that was for like 6 or 7 months, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he wasn't living with you, but he was at your house often.
Yes.
Is that the best way to describe it?
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about Elaine Hall, his ex-wife, right?
Yes.
After you came out for Labor Day in 2011, you never saw Dylan again,
No.
did you? You never saw the defendant and Dylan together in the same place, right?
Not after Labor
Not
Day.
after that. And you never even met Elaine Hall, much less saw her with her son.
No.
You don't really know anything about their relationship,
Just what I've been told.
and that's all from Mark Redwine.
Yeah.
Now, I want to, Counsel, could you put that photograph back up for me? I really appreciate that.
2011, you guys are out barbecuing.
Yes.
And you say you saw Dylan cut himself
Yes.
or something like that?
I was in the house.
You were in the house?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't see what happened outside the house?
Mark was outside. Dylan was in the house with me.
Counsel. And you saw him come in, he had a paper towel on his finger, something like that?
No, he cut his finger at the sink in the house.
Oh, in the house. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
And he put a paper towel on it, is that right?
Paper towel or napkin from the sink because he was over by the sink and came over where I was
Right.
sitting in the chair on the very end of that love seat.
And you said you saw him sitting here?
Yeah, I was in the other chair on the other side of him, and he came and sat right next to me.
Right here. Oh, okay.
No, I was on the love seat. Love seat, right?
Okay.
I was sitting right here.
Oh,
Sat down there.
great.
And Mark came in, and it's back to right back.
And you said you saw some drops of blood fall on the floor?
Yeah, he has one in the kitchen too. I like that.
Okay. And so those would have been kind of along the floor, is that
Yeah,
right?
going from the kitchen to the.
Okay. And he never walked over here to the couch at all, did he?
No, he sat.
Right.
next to me.
So there's no way he would have gotten his blood over here on the couch,
No,
right?
not
And
that I know of.
he didn't like lift up the corner of the rug and drip blood on the floor under the rug, did he?
No, that I know of, no.
Okay. You never saw him dripping blood on the corner of the coffee table, did you?
No,
And you didn't see him smearing blood all over the back of the couch with a love seat, did you?
No, that's mischaracterizing evidence. Facts not an evidence. Objection.
I'm asking what you saw, Your Honor.
Okay, the smearing I think is probably objectionable, okay?
Okay, you never saw him dripping blood anywhere on the love seat?
it's on the floor.
Just on the floor. He was holding his hand out, right?
He was holding his finger.
He was holding his finger.
Yeah.
Did you see him dripping blood anywhere over here, or was it more on the floor and in the kitchen?
It was just he dripped a couple drops right in front of the love seat, and
Okay.
then it was in the kitchen. And
Okay.
I cleaned it up.
Nowhere else?
No,
How did you clean it up? Do you remember?
yes, with paper towel.
Just wiped it up?
Yes,
That was Labor Day 2011?
Asked and answered.
Yes, it was.
Now, you said you met twice with the FBI, right?
yes,
They came to your house,
yes.
and then they came to your house again just a few months later. Or was that a phone call a second time?
Objection.
second-
Asked and answered. They came
Well,
first.
no, you can answer the question. Do you remember?
They came twice, and I don't remember how much of a distance it was. They came, two of them. I don't remember their names. They knocked on the
Okay, you
door.
don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to
Oh,
your,
They
okay.
knocked on the door, and then they just came in the entry. And like I said, I had 4 little ones running around, and they questioned me, and then they left. There was really not a whole lot to it.
But they didn't call you before they came, right?
No, I had no idea.
You had no idea they were coming.
Knocked on my door.
And the first one, that was December 5th, 2012, correct?
I don't honestly remember.
Okay. But it must have been unusual to get a knock on the door from the FBI.
Very unusual.
It must have surprised you.
It shocked me.
Yeah, the FBI's here, right? I think anybody would feel that way, right?
And the little kids were screaming, somebody's here, somebody's here. It shocked me.
Okay. That was the second time though, right?
Both times.
Both times. Okay. And I'm sure you invited them in.
They stepped into my foyer, and that's as far as they came in.
Okay. And you spoke to them, right?
Yeah.
They had questions for you.
Yeah.
And you were trying to be as helpful as you could.
Trying to be as helpful as I could, yeah.
Yeah. You gave them all the information they wanted.
They asked, I answered to the best of my knowledge, and that was it.
Right. And they were asking about Dylan and Mark, right?
They asked me if I knew that Dylan was missing, and I said I had heard on the news.
And then they asked you about your Labor Day trip.
They really didn't ask a whole lot about it.
Okay, so you volunteered it then?
I told them, well, they asked what it was, but they didn't get into detail.
Okay. You told them about when you guys went shooting with the
Yes.
guns.
Yes.
And you told them about the helmet with the faceplate,
Right.
right? And you told them about Dylan and Mark and Dylan sleeping in, right?
Yes.
You told them about Dylan playing video games,
I'm watching cartoons.
watching cartoons. You gave them as much detail as you possibly could. Right? Yeah. And that was on both occasions.
Yes.
And you never told them either time that Dylan bled in that house, did you?
They didn't ask me.
Oh, they didn't ask you?
I didn't, I'm sorry, but it happened and it just triggered something in my memory. I'm sorry.
You told them all those details.
Not all. I didn't tell them all the details.
I mean, would you like to read their reports? It's
I
pretty
didn't.
detailed.
Tell them everything we did.
I understand you told them about the shooting when you were shooting the guns,
Yes.
right? You told them about Dylan sleeping in,
Because they asked me if there was guns.
right?
Yes, I took guns with me.
You told them all those details, but you never told them anything about bleeding in the house.
They asked questions and I answered questions.
Did you ever tell them about Dylan
No.
bleeding? Never. And you've never, this is the,
Stop. You're talking over each other. Let it go for a little bit. Please, both of you, wait till the other one's done, okay? And we can like calm down a little bit and it'll be great. Go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
thank you. And this is the first time you've ever told anybody in law enforcement or in a court of law about Dylan bleeding in that house, right? Asked and answered, badgering. This is the first time she's been called to a courtroom on this issue.
All right, so you're overruled. You can answer the question.
The first time you've told anybody in law
First time
enforcement,
anybody had asked.
first time anybody asked. Even though you're trying to help the FBI as much as you could, tell them as much as you knew.
Answered their questions the best of my ability.
You lost touch with Mark Redwine after the Dr. Phil show, right?
Yes.
Because after Dylan went missing, you were talking a lot.
We were talking.
Objection is the form of the question. That's
Would you
vague
explain
and-
a little bit?
Sure, let me be more specific. And on November 18th and 19th, after that, after Dylan went missing, you were talking with Mark more frequently, right?
I talked to him a little bit after the show.
Right. And you were texting and on the phone with him, right?
Just shooting texts back and forth, and I was going through a divorce.
Okay.
So he was
And,
just my sounding board.
right. And he actually gave your name and phone number to law enforcement to be a character reference for him, right?
I don't know. That I don't know.
He gave your name and phone number to Dr. Phil's show to come and talk on Dr. Phil on his behalf.
Objection.
What's your objection?
I think double hearsay. What Mr. Redwine is communicating to other people about Ms. Alexander isn't anything she would be in a position to know.
I do question how she would know that, so you might want to lay a foundation.
Okay. Dr. Phil show called you up out of the blue and invited you to be on the show, to testify on Mark Redwine's behalf, right?
Not to testify, just to come and support him.
Fair enough. A poor choice of words, excuse me. You didn't call them yourself, did you?
No.
Right. So you went on the Dr. Phil show.
Yes.
And you were there on behalf of Mark Redwine.
Objection, asked and answered. I let it slide the first time, but asking it in this way is a problem. It's been asked the exact same question.
All right, you can answer the question.
Yes.
You were there
I
on
went
his,
to support him, yes.
to support him. And while you were on the Dr. Phil show, you were confronted about sending Facebook messages to Elaine Hall and Corey Redwine, right?
Yes, but I didn't.
Or you didn't.
No.
They said that they had the Facebook messages.
Well, I never saw.
Wait. Mr. Champagne?
That's fine, Judge. I can rephrase the question.
Well, that may not get you where you need to go, but let's see.
You were confronted about that and denied it, right?
Yes.
But the confronting part, move to strike, that would require somebody else saying something to her out of court, someone else being the declarant, and her response to it. So
But that's not here. hearsay, Mr. That is not hearsay. We talked about it, I don't know, more than once.
Well, out
So-
of court statement and the declarant was confronting her, and that's my objection.
And then there's the response, which is why it's being asked. So it's overruled. Go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Judge. You were there to profess his innocence, right?
Yes, I don't believe he did it.
Still to this day.
Yes,
But you weren't there in 2012, right?
no,
You don't know anything about Dylan and Mark's relationship, and other than Labor Day 2011 from your own experience,
yes,
right? You don't know about how their relationship was deteriorating in the summer and fall
You know, I'm not
2012.
gonna let you go there. She knows about 2011.
Okay. When you were on the Dr. Phil show, you didn't mention any bloodletting by Dylan in the house at that time, did you?
I never got talked to on the Dr. Phil show.
That's not the question. Did you bring that
No.
information forward?
No,
No.
nobody asked.
Nobody asked. So you have no idea what happened in 2012.
Objection.
That's sustained. I
All right.
mean, she already said she doesn't know what happened. She wasn't there.
Okay. And after 2012, after Dylan went missing, you said you just heard about this a little bit on the news, right?
Yes,
Were you aware that after Dylan arrived at Mark's house on November 18th, he was never heard from again?
all I
You
can,
aware of that now?
yes,
No, how is she supposed to be aware of that?
She said she watched the news.
Well, so what? So then it's coming through hearsay at that point, right?
Judge, but the point is her knowledge and whether she brings that to the table here as she's testifying.
Yeah, I'm not gonna let you do that. That's not right.
When the defendant and defense counsel, I should say, contacted you, that was after Mark Redwine had been arrested, right?
yes,
And they had,
Objection is to relevance. Of course, he had been arrested before defense counsel was involved.
I do agree with that. Judge, if you'll allow me, I don't have a lot of questions on the topic. I just want to clarify.
Well, we'll see. I'll let you ask the next one, but
Okay.
I'm tending to agree with the defense right now.
Right. And did they invite you for an interview?
the defense,
Yeah.
no,
They never did.
no,
They never interviewed you prior to today?
yesterday, day
Yesterday,
before,
the day before. And that's the first time you ever brought up Dylan bleeding in the living room, is that right?
yes.
To anyone?
I talked to my mom about it.
This is asked and answered repeatedly.
No, this is a little bit different, and this is, so she talked to her mom about it.
I talked to my mom about it. I've talked to my son about it.
So you knew it was
I
important.
didn't, huh?
You knew it was something important. It was relevant.
I didn't know it was that important. I really didn't.
Okay.
I don't,
You never brought it up to law enforcement in the 9 years since this
That's
happened.
been asked and answered, okay?
Nothing further.
Ms. Alexander, when the bleeding happened in the living room, was that something that was specifically asked of you, or did you volunteer it
to,
when you were discussing these things with defense
I
counsel?
volunteered it. Right. You didn't
So
ask
the-
me.
The first person to bring up anything related to blood, who was that?
Me?
It seemed like you wanted to clear up why there could be some confusion by some police officers or FBI agents about your name. Are there three names? I've only known you as Miss
Yes.
Alexander.
I was married Karen Lee Kennedy. Well, I was Karen Lee Obar, married Karen Lee Kennedy, got a divorce, married Karen Lee Alexander, then was going back to Kennedy. And instead of going back to Kennedy and changing everything, I stayed Alexander. It was too much trouble.
Do you have a Facebook account?
Yes,
Objection beyond the scope relevance.
The question was whether she'd reached out by Facebook to anybody.
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can't. It's okay, but next time let me
Oh,
say
okay, I'm
something.
sorry.
Okay, I was
I'm
thinking.
so sorry.
No, it's all right. I know you don't understand how this works. Go ahead.
And
I have one.
okay, what's your Facebook handle, or what do you go by on Facebook?
My name on Facebook is Karen Obar Alexander.
And did you ever use a Facebook account that was yours? Did you ever at any point reach out to anybody by Facebook involved in this case?
No, never.
And I beg your pardon, because I think that the way I asked the question suggested it was 2011. Now that you've seen, or 2012, that's on me. It sounds like now that you've seen that police report and there was discussion of the shooting the weapon, are you confident it was 2011?
Yes,
So apologies, that mistake is on me. Your memory is clear now.
yes. Now,
So I'd move to strike that entire colloquy. It's totally inappropriate.
You know what? You could have objected before it all came out, couldn't you, when it was going on? So
in motion.
it's in, again, you saw what happened, you decide what happened. His statements are not evidence, just like mine aren't, Mr. Champagne's aren't.
Ms. Alexander, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
thank you.
All right, any questions from the jury? Looks like we have at least one. Ms. Alexander, did you ever hike or ride ATVs? Well, let me back this up. a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. There's some mountains there. Do you know the name Middle Mountain? Do you know where that is?
Yes, if I'm right, it's at the end of the road where Mark lived, because we,
That was my question. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure you knew what it
Yes.
was. Okay. Did you ever hike or ride ATVs up Middle Mountain with Mark and Dylan?
yes, we did. We walked actually one day. We hiked up the road and through the campground and up the mountain a little bit. And then we walked around and then came back down.
And approximately how much time did you spend doing that hike? Do you
A
remember?
couple hours, probably 3.
Any follow-up, Mr. Mayor?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
Yes. You walk north from Mark's house to the little campground, right?
Yeah, out the front door and to the left.
To the left, and then you went up, there's a little campground there.
Yes.
At the end
We
of the road.
walked through the campground and then up the trail.
And it's a trail, right? Like a
Yeah,
traditional trail.
yes.
If I showed you a map, you think you'd recognize it?
I don't know. I just know we walked up there. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't believe it.
Too high altitude.
Let me ask you like this. If you didn't walk up through the steep cliffs that were there too.
No, we walked up and in a little ways and then around and then came back down.
Okay.
Not a long way.
Nothing for you.
Okay. Can this witness speak, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you're free to go.
Thank you.
And how long's your next witness gonna be?
I expect some time, Your Honor.
All right, because I don't want to go for more than 2 hours at a time, we'll take another recess. Remember my admonitions about not talking to each other. We'll start off again at 3:30. Everybody rise for the jury? Okay, we'll be in recess.
I think toilet for jury.
Did you ask for something, Mr. Moran? Oh, was you?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, can you talk? The microphone?
Judge, I would just ask the court to compel defense counsel to give us contact information for the previous witness. We have tried many times to reach her and not been able to. She's not returned any of our phone calls or responded to any of our messages. So if we could get good contact information for that witness, it'd be extremely helpful.
And why would that be helpful?
Judge, we have further, I know, we'd still like to reach her. Judge, to the best of my information, we've got that contact info from Discovery. I don't know that we have any ability to get that information beyond what the prosecution has available to them. I can check on that.
If you check on that, I'd appreciate it. Or have your investigators check on it, and they got a hold of it, didn't they?
I will look into that. But I mean,
I think they're entitled to it. I don't know what good it's doing at this point.
we have what they have.
I'm sorry.
We have what they have. We got it from them.
Okay.
But I will inquire with
Double
my.
check that. That'd be great. Thanks. All rise for the jury. Okay, will you be seated? Next defense witness.
That's called Kevin Torres.
Okay. Torres, come up to the witness stand, please. And please raise your right hand before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat.
Good afternoon, sir. Permission to inquire, Your Honor.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Yes.
My name is Kevin Torres. Spelling of my last name is Torres.
So where do you work?
I'm an agent with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation
And how long have you been doing that?
since 2013.
Prior to working with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, who was your employer?
I was employed by the Pueblo Police Department.
And before embarking on your career as a police officer, were you in school? What did you do before that?
Prior to becoming a police officer, I worked at the Federal Bureau of Prisons at the Supermax facility in Florence, Colorado. And then I went to college at Colorado State University.
And got your bachelor's.
That's correct. Bachelor of Science degree in sociology and criminology.
What is the title of your job now with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
I'm a field agent.
And is that the job you started with, or have you worked your way through other jobs with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
When I initially got hired with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, I was hired to be the supervisor of the crime scene unit, which is what I was doing in 2013 and 2014.
And part of the experience that informed your ability to do that work was that you had been a homicide detective. Is that right?
Homicide detective and crime scene investigator for Pueblo PD.
So major crimes unit, assaults, homicides, that kind of stuff.
Correct.
And this part, I think it's awkward for folks, but this is your opportunity to toot your horn. There have been big cases that you have been involved in solving. Pardon me if I say this wrong, but the Iacabone. You helped solve that case?
Yes.
And how'd you do that?
Through DNA.
Did you find blood somewhere?
I did.
There's another matter, the Candelario matter. Do you recall that one?
Yes, Ralph Candelario.
Is that one you helped solve?
It is.
And that was another instance where there had been blunt force trauma. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And lots of blood?
Yes.
I don't do this to embarrass you, but in 2018, you were awarded the Colorado Bureau of Investigation Employee of the Year. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
That's kind of a cool thing within the Bureau.
It was an honor, yes.
You have experience in crime scene investigation. Sorry if that's a dumb question.
Yes, I do.
Do you have experience in seeking to find DNA, biological matter, blood?
Yes, in collecting the blood so that it can be analyzed for DNA. That's correct.
And how long have you been working on developing an expertise in that role?
I mean, as a patrol officer, I'd say probably basic experience, but when I became a detective in 2004, that's when I really accelerated at the crime scene aspect of my career. So I'd say probably since 2004.
And since 2004, do you attend continuing education events? Do you attend seminars and otherwise to help you keep abreast of the state of the art in crime scene investigation?
Yes, I make every attempt to try to attend these professional conferences and seminars and training courses, for the exception of last year. It was the first time in 22 years that I had not been able to attend anything due to COVID.
Have you found blood on hundreds, thousands of occasions? How would you characterize your ability to find blood at crime scenes?
I mean, I found blood a lot. By hundreds would probably be accurate.
I want to direct your attention to February 11th, 2014, it being many years ago.
Judge, if counsel is looking to qualify Agent Torres as an expert in something, I agree he's very well qualified, but the question hasn't been asked yet.
Were you going to do that for crime scene, or what were you
Yeah,
thinking?
I don't know that it's exactly necessary, but I do agree that he's qualified. So I would seek to qualify him as an expert in crime scene investigation.
He'll be qualified in that field.
Thank you.
So if I could focus your attention to 2014, understanding it was a long time ago, but do you recall getting called out to do processing on a truck in February of 2014?
I do.
And do you remember as you arrived in Durango, what were you coming in from?
So I was called on February 11th, and I believe we set the date of February 13th, 2014 to process a white truck that the investigator had obtained a search warrant for, and they were looking for any type of biological evidence, as well as they were bringing a canine to the scene.
That's the one. So as you arrived in town, do you recall being briefed on what developments in the case, what was going on?
Yes, I met with the investigator, Tanya Goldbright.
And the other folks who were involved in this investigation, the crime scene or the truck analyzing?
So to my knowledge or my memory, it was myself, investigator Goldbright, and then I believe an hour or so later, the canine handler arrived, and then we had a discussion at that time about the procedure in which we would undertake the processing of that vehicle.
And was there some description just roughly about the facts, about what you're looking for and what the hypothesis of the law enforcement officials was?
I don't recall the hypothesis. I do remember having a discussion about a missing juvenile that investigator Goldbright identified to me as Dylan Redwine, and so that he had been missing since I believe it was November of 2012. And this vehicle that we would be processing belonged to the father of Dylan, Mr. Mark Redwine.
And as contained in the affidavit for the search warrant, there was some description about how it was suspected that that truck had been used to dispose of the child's body.
I believe there was a discussion about possibly the vehicle being used to transport a body, but I don't remember anything concrete about it being this is the vehicle, but just something that it may have been the vehicle.
Sure. That's what you were called in for, was to make that assessment.
Help search it for evidence, yes.
And those conversations were happening in the presence of that dog handler?
I don't believe the initial conversation did, but I know at some point when she arrived, we did have a conversation about the missing person, Mr. Dylan Redwine, and then also how she conducted her business, some of the cases that she had done, and how she searched the vehicles in those cases or searched the properties in those cases. And then I kind of explained to her my method for how I process vehicles and what is in the best interest of the evidence, as opposed to just kind of letting the dog do its thing.
Fair to say that some part of this briefing would have been making her aware of why this dodge was being looked at?
Objection, Judge. These are leading questions, and as the court can see, Mr. Moran's forcing information upon the agent that he thinks is helpful to his case.
These are leading questions, Mr. Moran. Ask the question.
What was said about the Dodge truck in the presence of the handler?
Objection asked and answered, actually.
Well, we'll see. You can ask the question, Agent Torres.
No, I don't recall exactly. I just, again, the only thing I specifically remember is the process in which I was going to undertake in trying to locate evidence.
When you say that there was a briefing, what do you mean?
And that would have been Investigator Goldbright basically giving me the reason as to why she called me. Basically that she had obtained a search warrant, that she had legal authority to search this vehicle, and the type of assistance, if any, that she had particular in mind. And in this case, she was looking, I believe, for some forensic type assistance in trying to locate blood, whether it was visible or latent.
Who else was present for the briefing? Do you recall?
Like I said, I believe that first hour or so, it was myself and Investigator Goldbright. And then I remember the canine handler coming in, and I'm roughly guessing about an hour later.
Do you recall that there was also a CBI agent, Jeff Brown, there?
Yes, he was there briefly for that briefing.
And when he was there for the briefing, the dog handler was also present, right?
I don't remember that.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the report from that day?
Sure.
You may.
Okay.
Did that refresh your recollection as to who was present for the briefing?
Yes.
And it was yourself?
Are you going to do an open-ended question here?
I'm sorry. Thank you. I forget. Who was present for the briefing?
It would have been myself, Agent Jeff Brown, Investigator Goldbright, and then Karen Corcoran.
And what was it obvious to you that everybody was attentive during the briefing?
Objection to relevance, and this has all been asked and answered.
I don't understand that question at all, in terms of why you need to get that out.
I would ask to,
They're being pretty attentive.
I would ask to approach if there's any need for further discussion on this.
All right, come on up.
I beg your pardon if this sounds like a dumb question. You can leave out the dumb question part.
A minute and a half, Mr. Moran.
You can leave out the dumb question part. As far as you could tell during this briefing, was everybody attentive?
I believe so, yes.
And nobody interrupted the briefing. Is that fair?
Not to my recollection, no.
Nobody interrupted to say, don't tell me what you found so far. Would that stand out to you?
I vaguely remember a conversation at the actual location where we processed the vehicle by the canine handler about blind verification, but I can't say whether or not she was doing that in this case.
And she wasn't doing that during the briefing, that came later, right?
Yeah, I couldn't say if it happened during the briefing, but I do remember vaguely a conversation at the impound place where we processed the vehicle occurring.
So what happened after the briefing?
We drove to the impound lot and did a visual inspection of the vehicle as far as just look at how it was situated and just kind of formulated a game plan to see how I was going to process that vehicle.
And if you would, what was the game plan? specifically dog first, you first, what was?
So the way I process vehicles, obviously for the purposes of DNA processing especially, I want to photograph the vehicle as it is, as I see it. That way there's a good crisp documentation of how that vehicle looks, the items that may be inside of it before anything is searched or disturbed or any type of canine is allowed to conduct a sniff of it.
And was those, what you're describing, the photos, that sort of comes first? And are those the photos that I showed you in the hallway?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Tendering the witness. Defendants 1093, and it should be sequential, though I have removed one image. Sounds better than I do.
So it's, but you didn't tell me how far you're going. So
1093 and
what's your last one?
1109, excluding 1105.
Judge, I believe these are all search warrant photos from discovery, and if that's the case, I have no objection to any of them being admitted.
They will all be admitted 1093 through 1109 with the exception of 1105.
So after the photographs are taken, that's when the dog does its sniffs. Did I understand that properly?
Yes. So I would have taken the photographs, and then if there was something in there that I would have seen, such as if I'd have seen an obvious stain of blood, such as just to give an example, I guess if there was a bullet hole in the vehicle and then there was blood around the bullet hole, I would pay more attention to that before allowing the canine to get in there. But in this case, I don't recall seeing anything that prevented the canine from doing their search at that time.
The idea that letting the canine in might disturb the evidence, and you don't want to do that.
That obvious evidence, yes.
In looking at the Dodge, had it recently been cleaned? Had the interior been cleaned recently that you could tell?
No, it had not.
And while you were doing work on this truck, did you take contemporaneous notes?
I did.
And did you observe anybody else taking contemporaneous notes?
I honestly couldn't tell you if they did or not. I was pretty focused on my process and looking for evidence.
Fair to say that the dog sniff part of the search, if you were observing it, was it filmed? Was there a video camera used to film that?
No, I don't recall a video camera being used. Or I didn't use a video camera. I can't really say if anybody else did or not.
And I'm basing this on your notes. I can refresh your recollection if you need me to. Do you remember where the dog cued in the interior of the truck?
Objection, Judge. This was expert testimony, and we litigated it in advance, and the jury's already heard about it. He's not qualified to talk about it.
That makes sense. I can avoid the word cued.
Well, cued's wrong anyway.
Judge, the process from the dog, Judge, the process from the dog has already been explained in testimony to the jury. So asking this witness specifics of that expert's work is outside the purview of his expertise, and that these aren't appropriate questions given the pretrial rulings of the court.
Your Honor, he's expert in these issues. He was following up after the dog did its sniffs to see if there could be corroboration of the items that the dog alerted to. That's
Well,
what he was
it's
there for.
already been testified to as to where the dog alerted, correct?
But it's different according to the contemporaneous notes taken by this individual.
Well, how does he even know when a dog is alerting or not?
Because
How does he know what this dog does?
You're right, I can ask that question.
Okay.
Sir, you were mentioning that there was some description provided by the handler as to how that dog works.
Judge, that's hearsay. From an ex-
No, it's not.
It's leading up to a hearsay question.
No, dogs are not, dogs don't make statements.
I understand. May I
and
explain?
Yes.
So what, the handler testified as to the findings of the dog by a trained final response.
Right.
If Mr. Moran's gonna ask this witness if the handler told him what that looks like, and then ask this witness to opine on what that dog did based on what the handler told him, that's gonna be hearsay and outside his expertise. So I think Mr. Moran can pick up with the process and with the stuff, and the jury already has the other information from a qualified expert.
Mr. Moran, any response?
I can ask it a different way. that
No, I don't
doesn't-
think, I don't think so. And here's the reason. That's when Mr. Johnson made me thinking about this a little more. I was going your way. I mean, they're qualified as a team. They work as a team. It's the dog handler who knows when somebody is hitting on something. So if you're just talking about observations, I don't think you can do it.
Your Honor, may we approach? I'd like to make an offer of proof about what this
Yes,
evidence would be.
I think that's a good idea. Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
Were you informed as to where the dog had given a final trained response such that you could go in and were using your forensic tools to corroborate that?
Yes.
And again, I can help you with your report if you do not recall, but do you remember in the interior where that final trained response was or where you were told to work more?
Yes.
Where was that, sir?
In the back seat,
And where else?
in the bed of the truck.
One of the reasons that you were enlisted on this particular day was because the dog was going to be in town and they wanted you to see if they could get corroboration of the dog's work through your expertise. Is that right?
I know the dog was flying in. As far as the second statement about the dog searching and then me corroborating the dog, I don't know that. I think there was a team effort, but a separate kind of approach in the fact that I'm not relying on the dog's not relying on me. We're working for the evidence, essentially looking for evidence. As I explained earlier, looking for blood that was not only visible, but blood that was also latent or any other type of trace evidence.
So the places where the dog alerted would have been places that you searched, right?
Correct.
And because you're taking contemporaneous notes and because you're obligated to create a crime scene report, you would have written down the places.
No, that's exactly what we talked about, and that's what the objection was. You've got as far as you can get with that. He can't interpret where there was a trained final response. If that's what you're trying to do, I'm not going to let you do it.
As an offer of proof.
As an offer of proof, you made one here at the bench, and I'm not going to say what it was, and you're stuck with what he just testified.
There were.
You're not going to say that in front of the jury.
Thank you, Judge.
There was not an offer of proof as to this question, and I would request
Entirely
to do so.
inappropriate.
As to this question.
All right, come up here. You can make your offer of proof.
So, thank you, pardon me. So what I was asking is, with respect to your contemporaneous notes, you were noting the places you'd been told the dog alerted so you could follow up and see with your forensic tools if those alerts could be corroborated. Is that right?
No, I don't recall saying that.
Is that true, that you would have noted in your crime scene report the places that you were asked to follow up because there had been a dog alert?
Mr. Johnson.
Objection, these are all leading questions and these mischaracterizing testimony as well.
You know, he can ask a leading question because this is a witness that's associated with the prosecution being part of CBI. Isn't that correct?
The witness is going to say he found no blood in the truck and called by the defense. So where he works, I don't think is relevant. He's certainly testifying to exculpatory information, at least on its face.
You know, I'm setting a foundational question here for impeachment, and we have not.
I'm going to let him lead a little bit, but I tend to agree. Unless you can show he's. I'll have to look at the rule. For leading questions, you can ask this leading question, and I'll decide on the others that are sure to come. So go ahead.
So I'm going to show you your report, and I'm going to ask you to identify in your report where you said that Karen Corcoran told you her dog alerted in the bed of the truck. May I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show the witness pages 26 through 28 of his report. It's 1797 through 1798. Discovery. The discussion on this issue is line 7 of page 1798. Sir, if you take your time reading that and let me know when you've had sufficient time to review it, and then we'll talk about what's in there when you're done reviewing it, please.
I'm sorry, did you cite a line? I missed the site. Did you say line?
Yes,
A line number?
but I would ask that you peruse the entire document to see if there's any mention in there of you following up with a dog alert in the bed of the truck. And the line, I think, is 7 or 8. It's on the second page. May I approach? I'll point it out. I'm not certain the line number.
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
May I approach? Yes. There's no mention of an alert in the bed of the truck, correct?
That's correct.
You directed some attention to the back seat, the interior of the pickup truck, right?
Yes, I did.
And is it fair to say that you used a chemical agent called luminol?
Correct.
Luminol oxidizes with iron, is that right?
Yes.
Will you explain further for the jury what luminol is and what it does?
Sure. Luminol is a chemiluminescent agent that we use to detect what we consider latent blood or hidden blood. Basically, it's blood that you wouldn't see with the human eye or blood that's been cleaned up, for example. If there was a bloodletting event on this table here and I wiped it up really clean, got it nice and clean, although I've cleaned the visible red stuff off of there, there's still traces of iron on the surface that will react with the agents in the luminol. It produces a very bright and intense reaction in the dark or in very dim light and can give us an idea of where there might be blood that was either degraded, cleaned up, or not visible to the eye.
So would a little bit of blood, if cleaned up, make a big smear?
Potentially.
Did you observe anything like that in the back of that pickup truck?
No.
And even after spraying luminol, there was nothing indicating the presence of oxidizing iron associated with blood?
I did see a reaction, but I also followed that up with another presumptive blood test, and it confirmed that it was negative.
You want a permission to publish 1093? Yes.
That I don't know.
This image, sir, what does this show?
This is just kind of an overall photograph of the bed of the truck.
And were you able to have any positive luminol reactions indicating the presence of blood in the back of the truck?
I didn't see any luminol reactions in the bed of the truck, but I did test several areas in the bed of the truck using phenolphthalein for blood.
So just double check, went in with the phenolphthalein test, right?
Actually, those visible stains that I saw, I tested first with phenolphthalein, then sprayed the luminol.
And the test for phenolphthalein was negative, indicating that there was no blood present in the back of the truck.
That's correct, yes.
The next one, please. 1101. Was there something in this image that caught your attention that you double checked with?
Yes, so there's two stains in this area that caught my attention that I tested with phenolphthalein.
And they were negative, right?
Both were negative, correct?
If we could move to 1102. Nothing of evidentiary value was collected from amongst these items, is that correct?
Not in this photograph, no. This is just the bed of the truck.
And had there been a necessity for it with your training and experience, would you have swabbed any of these items? A likelihood of DNA?
Yeah, so we removed each item from the bed of the truck. We spread it out, and I visually inspected it, and didn't see any stains that appeared to be possible blood.
Did you take swabs of any of the areas so they can take it back to the lab to check for DNA?
I believe I took trace swabs of the bed of the truck.
And those swabs never came back positive for DNA.
I'm negative for blood, I know that, but I can't speak to the results.
If I could have counsel move through to 1103. I think you were mentioning that there was something missing in that photograph.
Yes.
And why was this room taken from the bed of the truck?
So this broom was observed in the bed of the truck, and when we removed the item and visually inspected it, we saw some hair on the very end of it and began to photograph it and collect that hair. Actually, I believe we collected the entire broom.
And based on your search, was that hair the only, attached to the broom, the only human remain that you were able to identify in the back of the truck?
I can't say human remain because I don't know if it's human or animal hair.
And if I could have counsel move on, that's 1104. And on the end of it, this is just a close-up. Would you agree?
Yes, that's a close-up of the hair on the end of the broom.
And it depicts the hairs. CBI has the ability to test hairs for mitochondrial DNA, is that right?
Not to my knowledge presently, but they can do a visual examination, determine whether it's human or animal, and if there's a root attached. And if there's a root attached, they can do nuclear DNA. But to my knowledge, we're still sending mitochondrial DNA to source it to a private lab.
Was there,
We're still sourcing it out to a private lab. No problem.
And it was mitochondrial DNA.
nothing like that was ever gained from this, is that right?
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I need to go check it. Yeah, go ahead. This is on Mr. Bogan, it's 1105. Thank you, Mr. Bogan. Another photograph that you took,
Yes,
and again, showing the condition of the truck.
correct.
Nothing taken from these formats that was later determined to be evidentiary value.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I collected items, but I couldn't speak to their laboratory analysis.
In your esteemed career as a CBI analyst, spanning now 2 decades, have you found blood transfer on the seat of car?
Yes.
Did you find any on the seat of these cars?
No.
If I could have council scroll to 1107. Same holds true of this format, is that right?
Correct.
There was no blood transfer found here,
Correct.
no touch DNA.
Correct.
If I could have council move to 1108. Nothing of evidentiary value in this photograph, is that right?
Correct.
Moving on to 1109, please. This is best suggested by the witness, I think.
Do we have those pictures? They're already there? Okay, great.
We discussed the luminol application in the back seat, but I also believe that you took trace swabs from the rear seat. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Trace swabs are named that way for a reason?
Yeah, because you don't, I mean, it's kind of a blind swab. You don't know what you're picking up. If you're picking up biological matter or some kind of chemical matter, you just don't know.
But over your years of experience, you've got a general idea where to apply trace swabs?
Of where to collect them from?
Sure, like where evidence is most likely to lie in a vehicle, given your experience.
It's more of a mythology, but or a methodology, I'd say. But yes.
And it's fair to say that nothing of evidentiary value was gained from those trace swabs of that truck.
Again, I can't speak to the analysis part of it, but I did collect them.
You used at least phenolphthalein to detect the presence of blood on the trace swab?
That's correct.
All of it negative, right?
Yes.
And even though you had a hypothesis as to why the tire jack had illuminated positive for luminol and then negative with phenolphthalein, the investigator there, did she decide to send it off for further lab work anyway?
Yes, we collected it just as a precaution, and I believe she had it tested.
Never any DNA found there?
Again, I don't know specifically on that.
And were you aware when you did this evaluation or inspection in 2014 that previously that truck had once been examined by CBI?
I don't remember it being, if it was examined by CBI. I know it had been, I think she just mentioned that it had previously been searched or examined, or visually searched, I believe.
In November of 2012 or November 29, 2012, search warrant?
I believe so, yes.
And someone with a similar amount of expertise or similar sort of expertise, maybe not as great as you are, but somebody with your expertise, would they have also been called in to search on that day based on what you know of CBI?
In 2012 or?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I believe so.
So that's all I have on direct examination. I think the prosecutor will have questions for you.
Cross. Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Agent Torres.
Good afternoon.
So if Teresa Chiromcha and Tanya Goldbright had already testified in the people's case that there's no blood in this truck, you agree?
Correct.
And in terms of luminol, it was very easy for you to rule out whether it was blood or not simply by applying phenolphthalein.
Correct.
Because in this particular search, they were negative.
Yes.
So hypothetically speaking, if a human remains detection canine had indicated accurately in the truck, it's fair to say that the odor was coming from something other than small amounts of blood.
Correct.
Now, counsel asked you about a fingernail and a hair.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. He doesn't have the foundation for that last question. There's also hair and a fingernail there. But this wasn't allowed on my direct. It shouldn't be allowed on cross-examination. He doesn't have that expertise.
You know, you got to object before things come out. It's a little difficult for me to stop things from happening.
It's a hypothetical, Judge, and he's saying that it wouldn't be blood because of his analysis.
I don't think.
Your Honor, he can't.
Would you let me talk? Thank you. I don't think that was the exact objection, was it, Mr. Moran? About the blood, it was about the hair and the fingernail? Or not?
Right. I'm not,
No, there was no question that he asked you about a fingernail and a hair. That was the question. So you're overruled.
this witness has not been qualified to opine on what those dogs alert to.
Has he been asked that yet? He hasn't been asked that yet. It may be coming.
Mr. Moran asked it. I haven't asked it.
And it was objected to, and I moved on.
Let's move on.
So let's talk about the fingernail and the hair. You're asked about those. You recall that, Agent Torres?
I do.
And you were showing pictures of them, right?
Yes.
But defense counsel didn't ask you where in the truck those items were located, did he?
No.
And he didn't show you the pictures of where in the truck the fingernail and the hair were located, did he?
No, I think we had a zoomed in photograph.
Okay.
Your Honor, those are the photographs I was provided, so objection. Well, this is facts not in evidence, but because
There's no facts and evidence. He's just asking what you did, and this is fine. I don't see a problem with this.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Just I've excluded photos. I've not. I've showed what they provided us.
So, Agent, may I?
You can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Agent, you indicated that there's a series of photographs that you take, correct?
Correct.
And that series of photographs shows every area in the truck first.
Correct.
And then if you're going to take photographs of a fingernail or a hair, your photographs go from out to in so you can tell where in the truck those items actually are recovered.
Correct. We do an overall medium range and then a close-up view, and then sometimes even more of a close-up view.
So far the jury's seen only the close-up view of a hair and a fingernail that have been referred to by defense counsel as human remains. You recall that?
Yes.
Where in the truck were the fingernail and the hair that counsel showed you in the close-up photos actually recovered?
So the one photograph where the shadow is, where I was saying that it's shadowed out, you can't see the hair in that photograph particularly well. That photograph was taken from the front driver's side floorboard underneath the floor mat. And there was a hair found right there. And then the nail clipping was found on the driver's side floorboard, and it would be along the left-hand side of the truck. So as you're getting out, it would be kind of down where you would flip your gas tank open or adjust your seat down in that area.
They're both found in the front seat, not the back seat, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. You were asked about the broom, too. Do you recall where the broom that had a couple of hairs on it was found in the truck?
Yes, I do.
Was that in the bed of the truck?
It was in the bed of the truck.
Okay. And would it refresh or do you recall exactly where in the bed of the truck, or would it refresh your recollection to actually see a photograph of where that broom was in the bed of the truck?
Yeah, I mean, I have it in my mind, but yes, I would like to see the actual photograph with it in there and just.
May I approach you, Honor? This is not a defense exhibit, but it's one of the photographs from this search.
Sure. Is it a marked exhibit?
It's 1385 in the disc of photographs we provided to defense for his reference. I'm just going to use it to refresh his recollection.
All right, that's fine.
Okay.
So, Agent Torres, those couple of hairs on the end of that broomstick, is it fair to say those were located more towards the middle or maybe just a touch to the right in the bed of the pickup truck?
Yes.
And they're close towards the tailgate, correct?
Yeah, close to the tailgate, kind of on the passenger side.
Is that broom that council had in the exhibit, is that end with the hairs anywhere near the driver's side wheel well that's up against the back of the truck?
No.
Now, you talked about some cards in the car that were located.
Right.
Were those cards saying any information related to the homicide of this child, please call, or were those missing child cards?
I'd have to look at them specifically just to make sure, but
Do you have the exhibits in front of you?
I
sir?
do.
Okay. And may I approach her?
Yeah, I'd like to help you out with it.
On that exhibit, sir, is there any reference to notifying police about evidence of a homicide, things like that?
Yes, it has contact information for the La Plata County Sheriff's Office, and refers to Dylan Redwine as missing.
Okay. So those are missing child cards as opposed to tell us evidence of a crime cards.
Correct.
And these were located in February 13th of 2014?
Correct.
You're aware from the investigation that Dylan was first found way back in June of 2013, right?
Yes, I believe parts of the remains were found, yes.
All right. And you testified to your recollection that there were somewhat minimal facts given going into the search. Is that accurate?
For me, there was, yes.
And the canine handler you said was even an hour late?
Yeah, roughly. I can't say exactly, but it was somewhere a little bit later than when I got there.
And you recall that canine handler specifically discussing blind verification in terms of what information was received in the case, correct?
Yeah, there was a discussion at the actual location where we processed it about not telling her if I find something or just to see if her dog can locate it.
So fair to say that what you recall is her being careful about what information she received in the case?
Yes.
And your report itself, is that about her statements or that's about the work that you did in the case?
About the work that I did.
Is perhaps her report a better way to see expert opinions on trained final responses?
Objection as to his foundation, I guess, to answer that question.
Well, it's an argumentative question anyway, Mr. Johnson. So I'm going to sustain the objection on that basis.
Okay. But based on your memory, sir, you remember that the dog indicated in the truck bed?
I do.
And that's an area that you searched?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the searches that you did, you testified that you do an independent search from the dog and you search everywhere regardless of what the dog does, correct?
Correct.
And you do that because you might find something that the dog didn't.
Sure.
And you do that because the dog might smell something that you don't see.
Correct.
No further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any questions from the jury? Can this witness be excused? You okay with that, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do we have somebody we can start or not? Okay. All right. Come on up to the witness stand, Ms. Smith. Yes, right up here. And before you sit down, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Have a seat.
May it please the court? Can you please state and spell your name for the record, please?
Tracy Smith, Traci, last name Smith, Smith.
And in November of 2015, were you employed with the La Plata County Sheriff's Department?
Yes,
And what was your capacity? What were you employed? What were you doing?
I was an administrative assistant too for the investigations division.
And did your responsibilities under that position include sometimes working as an evidence tech in the evidence room and lockers?
Yes, I was back up in her absence.
And can you explain what that means and what your responsibilities were working with the evidence lockers in the evidence room at the La Plata County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, if there was ongoing cases, I would sometimes check in evidence, sign it in, make sure that it was properly labeled, and then have the investigators sign off on it as well, or the deputies, whoever was involved, and then sort in evidence. Or if it was to be released, then I would, a lot of times because I was the assistant, I would verify with investigators first because it was not my main job duty. But then I would sign it out and release it to parties if necessary.
And can you explain to the jury the import of that process of having people sign it in and having people sign out evidence at the evidence room?
Yes, there was a sheet. We had a log. It was basically, it had a date and the name of the party. If I'm the one signing it out, I would put my signature and then put that I was releasing it to a party. And the person accepting it, whether it was an outside party or an investigator or a deputy, then they would sign on the following line with the date, their name, and that they had accepted it, and their signature as well.
And is that document called an evidence log?
Correct.
And it sounds like you're familiar with the process and procedure of how that gets filled out and maintained and whatnot.
Correct.
And were evidence logs kept and maintained as part of the regular course of business at the La Plata County Sheriff's Department evidence room?
Yes.
Permission to approach with what has been previously marked as 1924. That's going to be a new number for everyone.
Yes.
And without discussing the contents, because it hasn't been admitted yet, the defendant's 1924, is that an accurate reproduction of an evidence log in this case?
It appears to be yes.
I'll move for the admission of 1924 under 8036, Judge.
Family Board Air.
Sure.
You're not the keeper of these records, right?
No, I was not.
Back then in 2012 or 13 or even 2015,
No, I was never in charge of evidence. I was merely a backup.
you were backup.
Mhm.
And you didn't produce these particular records today for trial.
No, I did not.
You know, I don't think he's met the foundational requirements for this type of admission. This is not the custodian of records.
I can ask one more question and make argument. Do you see your signature on this where you signed something out as part of the process that you described to the jury?
Yes, I do.
So this is actually a document that you contributed to and signed. And
I see that my signature is on here as somebody who would have released an item. Yes.
Judge, I would again move for admission under 8036, Schmutz v. Bowles, Bolles, which relies on U.S. v. Keplinger, Keplinger.
Can you give me a site?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Look up that way.
Bowles is 800 Pacific 2nd, 1307. Keplinger is 776 F2D 678. For in the language relied on in Keplinger and referred to in Bowles says that in sum, a qualified witness to the business record exception would only be someone with knowledge of the procedures governing the creation and maintenance of the type of records sought to be admitted. and recognition that ordinary business records tend to be unusually reliable. The exception is designed to avoid the burdensome process of producing as witnesses or accounting for the non-production of all participants in the process of gathering and transmitting and
Got it.
recording the information.
So I don't mean to interrupt counsel. While I still don't believe that the proper foundation has been laid, we don't have any reason to doubt the reliability of this actual document, so this is fine.
All right, it is admitted.
And I'm about 45 seconds behind. I'm going to ask to publish briefly. Judge.
Go ahead. I can turn this off.
Pardon me. Zooming in on item 530. What is that item, Ms. Smith?
530,
Yes, ma'am.
it says one human skull GPS, and it has the GPS coordinates. And then it has the evidence number, the property number, and the shelf on which it was contained.
And then if we scroll down to the bottom of that same page, are you able to look at this document and see when it was checked into evidence and by whom?
It appears, yes. I don't recognize the signature of whom, actually. For person accepting. I can't read that, but I do see accepted number 530.
And do you get the date on that very first entry there?
It says 11/9/2015.
And do you see any documentation of this piece of evidence being checked into or checked out of evidence prior to 11/9/2015?
No,
And the one section that you signed, I think it's, what's the date on that? I'm blowing it up.
it's 12/1/2015.
And does it say who you signed it out to and when it was returned?
It says I released it to Lieutenant Goldbright. And then beneath that, it says that it's her signature and number 530 was accepted back.
No further questions for this witness, Judge.
Any questions?
No questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury? Can she be released?
No objection.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Do you have anybody else we can put on or not?
I think we can call Mr. Richard Swayze.
Let the witness stand up here, please, sir. Put up over here. And raise your right hand before you sit down. I need to swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Have a seat. You're a little soft-spoken. Speak up and into the microphone. Okay. People just have to hear you. Go ahead, Mr. Bogan.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record, please?
Richard Allen Swayze, RICHARDALLANSWAYZE.
And in the fall of 2012, were you employed at United Pipeline?
I was.
And in what capacity?
At that time, I believe I was the equipment manager.
And briefly, what were your responsibilities at United Pipeline as the equipment manager?
I did a lot of things. I took care of the equipment, of course, but I also was sent to the field when they were having problems with jobs. So it's kind of a troubleshooter for them as well.
And at that same time period, fall of 2012, was Mr. Mark Redwine employed at United Pipeline as well?
I'm going to say yes. The dates are a little fuzzy for me, but I'm going to assume that it was.
And if you have difficulty remembering anything, just let me or the judge know. And
It's been a while, so the dates are a little confusing.
okay. Do you recall what Mr. Mark Redwine's responsibilities were at United Pipeline? And
Yeah, so Mark's responsibilities kind of changed on a day-to-day basis. He was a truck driver, and then when we'd get shorthanded, they'd make him a superintendent in the field to run a job. And at one point, I think he was made, instead of being a temporary supervisor, I think he was made a permanent supervisor, but then I think they moved him back to a temp supervisor.
And as the equipment manager, would you have interactions with Mr. Mark Redwine and other supervisors and employees there at United Pipeline?
So, yes, anybody that drove or operated a piece of equipment, I had interaction with. Some more than others. So in Mark's case, I would have had more interaction with him when he was a superintendent than I would some of the just employees that were working under the superintendent.
And at this point, I'm going to start to ask some specific date questions. And do you recall having any interaction with Mr. Mark Redwine on November 18th, 2012?
So, let's see here. So if the 18th is the day that all this is in question that morning, then yes.
It's
The following
it's
day?
the day before
Okay, the
the day you're talking about.
Okay, all right. Then yes, I did. If that would have been the morning somewhere between 7:45 and 8.
We're close. We're one date off, and I'm going to ask the lead a little bit
Go
to
ahead,
expert.
go ahead.
Do you recall on November 18th, Mark Redwine returning a work truck?
He did return the work truck, but it was after hours, I believe.
Okay.
And so I was not there
Okay.
when the truck was returned. Okay. I know the truck made it in. I checked it on the Faircom that night. So I know the truck made it in. And of course, it was there that morning when I got to work at 6:45.
Okay. So based upon where you work, sounds like you know that Mr. Mark Redwine returned one of the United Pipeline trucks to United Pipe the evening after the close of business on November 18th.
The dates, I'm really not,
I got you.
I can't swear to the dates here. So, but yes, he did return a truck. I don't remember what time.
The morning after that date, the date that he returned the truck,
Yes, sir.
do you recall seeing Mark Redwine, Mr. Mark Redwine, at United Pipe?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe that interaction, please?
It had to have been somewhere between 7:45 and 8:15. I'll say he came into the office to return paperwork. When the superintendent come back from the job, they got to give us a bunch of paperwork, and then they had to inform me of any damage to any vehicles, anything that needed to be fixed, so that it could go out on the next job. Mark showed up that morning to do that, and we had an hour. I believe it was right at an hour-long conversation. It was a fairly long conversation because I was trying to get back to work, and we were still talking.
And do you recall him being there at United Pipe from about 8 in the morning or thereabouts to about 9 or so?
I would say he had been there every bit of that time because like I said, we had a lengthy conversation. And then he still had to go upstairs and deal with the job superintendent that work in the office that oversees the job.
And do you know if he was there to talk to payroll or anyone like that?
I have no idea on that. We were extremely busy at that point in time, and we're understaffed, and it was all I could do to keep up with the job, let alone worry about where somebody was going.
Do you recall anything out of the normal regarding his demeanor or how he presented that morning, November 19th?
I do, but I don't remember all the details about it. So what I found at the time, I didn't think nothing of it. It was a day later or 2 days later when everything started taking place that it seemed, I didn't know if it meant anything or didn't mean anything, but I said something about it. So in the position I was in, I was not very well liked. I was pretty tough on everybody in the company.
Why is that?
If you tore something up, I was constantly guiding the guys to tearing stuff up, all the rest of it. Upper management loved me because I was the ass of the place. So, but anyway, what was funny is me and Mark really never had a personal conversation, let's say, in this one. And the conversation was, it was about his son. It may have been both sons.
And I'm gonna ask you to, I got you. I'm gonna ask you not to talk about what were the words he said, but the way he presented, his mood, his demeanor.
He was happier than I've ever seen.
Anything out of the normal regarding his demeanor?
Yes, he looked more sober, clearer, and happier than I normally would see him on a day after getting back into town and showing up that early in the morning.
And based upon your experience, how do guys who've been out in the field present sometimes when they've been out in the field for a while?
Most, I won't say all of them because I can't do that, but 90% of them are heavy drinkers. And a lot of it's from being away and living in a motel room, nothing else to do, I guess. And I would classify Mark as one of those. But that morning, he didn't have the bloodshot eyes that he normally does. He looked like a normal person for a change and happier, and happy, I should say.
Nothing further for this witness on direct.
Okay, how long are you gonna be, Mr. Champagne?
I could probably get this done in about 10 minutes, Judge.
All right.
Bear with me, I think you can take care of it. Yep. You said you weren't certain on the dates, right?
That is true, Senator.
Okay. Did you have some information that he was coming back from New Mexico to meet up with his son?
No, I didn't know anything about that.
Okay.
The only thing I knew about was that the truck, we had told him that the truck had to be returned to Durango on his return trip and not take it to his house like he normally did.
Okay.
And so that's the only reason I checked to see if the truck made it in that night.
So it could have been the 17th, right? The night of the 17th that he returned that truck?
It could have, without the intelligence reports at this point, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. You're not sure.
I'm not sure. No, sir.
And he came in pretty early, 7:45, it sounds like, right?
Here again, ballpark. We have a safety meeting at 7:30. It usually takes about 15 minutes. I just sat down in my office, and it was right in there somewhere that he showed up.
Okay. And was your conversation there in the office?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And were you you said you were extremely busy. You were doing other things while he was talking with you, or?
So there was me and another gentleman. The operation manager sits next to me in the same office.
Okay.
And the conversation was going on between the three of us.
Okay.
And I had, I would turn my back on him every now and again to type something else into the computer and sit around in my chair and engage in the conversation.
You were interviewed by law enforcement about this situation, right?
I was.
Would you remember what you spoke to about law enforcement? Or I can ask you.
And, no, not really, because when law enforcement interviewed me, it was several months afterwards.
Right.
And I told them at that time
they were asking me about this conversation.
Right.
And I said, well, you kind of waited a little too long for me to remember any of it. You know, I can only remember so much information, and this didn't seem like it was going to mean anything. I spoke up, didn't sound like anybody thought it was a big deal one way or the other, and so I forgot about it.
And so the conversation is not something that was like real important to you or that you locked into your memory bank.
That is a true statement.
Okay. And you really had no personal relationship with this guy at all, right?
No, sir.
Okay.
Outside of work.
And it sounds like you were busy trying to get him to move along, and
Yes, sir, I was.
he just kept talking.
Yes, sir.
Had he ever done that before?
No, sir. That's what I found so strange about the whole conversation was when a couple of days had passed, it just seemed really strange to me.
Did he tell you that he left his son up at the house by Aceto?
No, well, if he did, I do not remember that.
Did he tell you that it was his son's very first day on their big trip together?
Yes.
He did.
Well, I don't know that I vaguely remember him saying something about picking him up, and the whole conversation was about what they were going to do while he was here.
Okay.
But I don't remember any of it.
Okay.
You know, it was something about sports, but I don't remember whether he'd been playing sports or they were going to go do something, some kind of sporting activity. I just don't remember. It's been too long.
Yeah, I understand that. Now, when you were interviewed by law enforcement, you told them that there was like nothing out of the ordinary relating to this conversation, right?
So yes, there was.
Date and time in the statement, Judge, for 6/13.
That's fine. Yeah, this is September 10th of 2013, Judge, page 708, 709. On September 10th, you gave this interview and you told them there was nothing out of the ordinary regarding this conversation. Does that sound right?
I guess if I said that, then I'll have to stand by it.
Okay. And you remembered back then about the conversation a lot better than you do now here today, right?
Yes. Okay. But I'm pretty certain at that time I told them that this was odd that we had this. The only thing found odd about it was we had a conversation we'd never had before.
It was odd that the conversation had occurred in the way it did.
Yeah.
But that there was nothing about his demeanor that was anything out of the ordinary. It was normal.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. If that's what I said, then we say.
Okay.
I'll stand by what I said back then versus
what you
would. Yeah.
Today.
Yes.
So this is probably the more reliable statement. There was nothing out of the ordinary, other than the length of the conversation.
Yeah.
No further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Judge.
Any questions from the jury? May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swayze. You're
Yep.
free to go.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take our, well, we'll let you go home. Let's put it that way. Again, remember your admonitions. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't initiate, post, or respond to anything about this case on social media. Do keep an open mind throughout the trial, and you should reach your decision only during final deliberations. Don't let any third person discuss this case in your presence. And if anybody tries to, after you've told them not to, please let me know. Don't talk with any witnesses, the defendant, or lawyers in the case. Don't gather any information on your own. Don't do any outside reading on this case. Don't visit anywhere mentioned in the place. Don't read about it in the paper or look at it on the radio, TV, internet, social media, or the media source. Don't learn about the case outside of the courtroom. We'll start the same time. I think we're making pretty good progress. I'm going to talk to the attorneys after you're gone about what the schedule is going to be, and I'll let you know in the morning. Okay? Everybody rise for the jury? All right, please be seated. And unless you guys want this on the record, I don't see the need. I'm just trying to figure out where we're at. So, Mr. Bogan, how much, so we're off. Yeah, we're off. How much more do you think you have?
I mean, tomorrow will be 3 experts, one guy and Nyquist, and then a sprinkling of lay witnesses. as well. I think 3 experts and some lay witnesses is gonna put us through the close of business tomorrow.
So maybe, depending on how it goes, may go into Wednesday morning.
I can see that happening.
Okay.
With experts, you never know.
Okay, and then with rebuttal, you guys, I mean, I'm not gonna hold you to it yet. You haven't heard everything yet, but where are you at? Yeah, I believe so. Okay, Mr. Champagne, what are you thinking?
For rebuttal?
Yeah, and that could, you could add to it as things go by.
Yeah, Judge, I would, one moment, please.
Go ahead.
Can we get an accurate answer?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. You guys wanna talk, that's fine.
That's what I was gonna say, Judge. I think on the outside it would be a full day, but probably less. That's our goal.
So hopefully we could get it done on Wednesday or part into Thursday.
I think Thursday noon would be the very safe bet.
Okay. My thought would be as soon as we are done with all the evidence, whether that be at 5 o'clock at night or 8:30 in the morning, we're gonna meet about instructions. And then, like I told you before, I'll whatever time that is, we'll give the jury the rest of the day off so that we can work on instructions, and then you guys will have a full day uninterrupted to do closings, and then they'll get a little bit of time to deliberate depending on how long they want to stay. So, okay. Yeah. We can adjust it some. I mean, I guess 8:30 is that's a little extreme. I'm hoping that people have looked at what I sent them and there won't be, I mean, I know what I want to do, but there may be differences after I hear from you. So, but I did send it to you a week ago Saturday, so I'll make sure you guys have looked at it before we close. So,
We're actively working on it, Judge.
all right. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Mhm. You too.